Hi, welcome back guys. This is your sensei, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Naruto Became Shadow Executioner? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. 2 years ago, when Naruto still lived there, the air in the forest was thick with fog as Naruto stumbled deeper into its heart, the eerie silence broken only by the crackling of twigs under his feet. He had wandered too far. A low, guttural growl vibrated through the trees and Naruto froze as several pairs of gleaming eyes appeared in the darkness ahead. Massive hulking shapes lumbered forward, their bodies a mix of scales and fur, eyes glinting with predatory intent. Each creature looked like something born from a nightmare, a twisted fusion of animal and something darker. Naruto's legs went weak and his instincts screamed to run, but his body refused to obey. He collapsed to the forest floor, shaking and small against the looming threat. He urged himself to move, voice barely a whisper, but the terror held him rigid. Inside his mind, a voice echoed, calm and steady, telling him to relax and breathe. Naruto mentally snapped back that he could not be calm with those things in front of him. There was no reply, but the forest dissolved as the monstrous shapes blurred into shadows. Naruto blinked and found himself standing in a vast, otherworldly space where dark and light colors swirled like a cosmic ocean. In the distance, 3 figures waited. The first was a massive 9-tailed fox with red fur and fierce, intelligent eyes Kurama. The second was a tall, shadowed figure in dark armor, presence cold and resolute Kaminari Yoroi. The third wore a smirk, a blend of amusement and a sinister thrill, resembling Naruto like a twisted reflection while radiating chaotic, raw energy that was at once comforting and unsettling. Naruto felt an odd familiarity staring at this third figure. The smirking figure regarded Naruto with sardonic amusement and introduced himself as Chika, explaining that he knew Naruto in a different way and that he would handle the monsters. He reached out and placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder with a commanding certainty, and the inner space vanished as a dazed calm settled over Naruto. Naruto's consciousness slipped away as something inside him snapped. His shoulders straightened, the tremor fading into a cold, controlled stillness, and a predatory grin touched his face. Chika had taken control. Chika asserted himself through Naruto, flexing Naruto's fingers as he drew on the spiritual energy within him. The energy crackled and sharpened Naruto's senses, filling him with newfound strength. When one creature lunged with claws aimed at Naruto's throat, Chika did not flinch. He sidestepped with blurred speed and delivered a crushing blow that sent the creature reeling before it collapsed, motionless. Before the others could react, Chika closed the distance in an instant. His strike met another beast with staggering force, dropping it out of the fight. The remaining creatures hesitated, sensing this was no ordinary prey. Chika tilted Naruto's head and taunted them, daring them to attack. The creatures roared and charged, and Chika met them head-on in a whirlwind of precise, brutal technique. He evaded a swipe and countered with a powerful elbow that sent another beast stumbling, then followed with a knee that rendered it unable to continue. When a monster tried to flank him, Chika intercepted the strike and disrupted its momentum, leaving it incapacitated against a tree. The final beast attempted to flee, but Chika reappeared in its path and delivered a decisive roundhouse that ended its escape. He then channeled a concentrated burst of energy through his palm that overwhelmed the creature until it dissipated like smoke. Silence fell over the forest. Chika stood amid the aftermath, energy faintly crackling at his hands as he let out a satisfied breath and remarked that the fight had been entertaining. Naruto's awareness crept back and the cruel grin faded. In his mind Chika's dark laughter lingered, and Chika told him to get used to it. This was just the beginning, and Chika's essence faded into Naruto. Naruto stared at his stained hands, breathing ragged as the weight of what had just happened sank in. He felt both exhilarated and unsettled by the memory of that sadistic smile, a smile that felt like his own and yet entirely different. Info on Chika. Over 1,000 years ago, Chika was appointed as the first captain of the 2nd Division. During that time, he fought back against the Lichtrike when they invaded the Soul Society, defeating many Quincy with overwhelming force and ultimately helping to turn the tide against the invasion. He later settled into peacetime, finding things worth protecting. Personality. According to Yoruichi, Chika was infamous for being brutal and cold-blooded, a reputation earned when he ruthlessly defeated the invading Quincy of the Lichtreich. 8 years after Naruto's birth. At the academy, the classroom buzzed as Iruka reviewed Konoha's foundational history. Naruto lay with his head propped on one hand, eyelids drooping, his shaggy white-yellow hair falling over his face. It was not boredom. Naruto was fully alert, letting Iruka's voice filter through the room like background music. He liked blending into the noise, unnoticed. This was his stage, and Naruto Uzumaki knew how to play his part. From his half-lidded gaze, he sensed a flare of malice aimed at him. Naruto's tension tightened for a moment, but Kaminari Yoroi's voice in his mind advised him to control it and save it for someone more deserving. Naruto drew a deep, calming breath and lifted his head lazily, locking eyes with the source of the glare, Mizuki. The man's narrowed eyes showed irritation that Naruto had learned to relish. Naruto spoke in a lazy, amused drawl and Mizuki responded with a clipped admonition reminding him to pay attention. The warning carried the forced patience of someone who harbored resentment. Several students stifled chuckles. Iruka turned, trying to hide a smile and shooting Naruto a half-hearted glare. Naruto shrugged and glanced sideways at Shikamaru, who struggled to keep his eyes open, head drooping. Naruto nudged him with an elbow, and Shikamaru muttered that clouds were more interesting than history. Naruto suppressed a laugh. He wondered why Mizuki did not single out Shikamaru in the same way. It was not his concern. Kurama, irritated, muttered in Naruto's mind that the villagers were fools. Naruto accepted that they could hate him. It made no difference. Inwardly, he considered how satisfying it would be if they ever acted on that hatred. If they did, he told himself, he would respond decisively. As the lesson dragged on, Iruka brightened and asked the class who they thought had been the strongest Hokage. Hands shot up around the room. One student praised the fourth Hokage for his speed and claimed he had prevailed against 1,000 IWA ninja, adding that Minato had defeated the Nine Tails. The admiration for his father stirred a quiet pride in Naruto, a feeling he rarely allowed himself to enjoy, revealing his lineage remained too valuable a secret. Some students criticized Tobirama and Hiruzen out of ignorance. Iruka interjected sternly, urging the class to show respect for the third Hokage, who had led the village through hard times. Naruto leaned back, crossing his arms, and calmly argued that the first Hokage was the greatest, reasoning that Hashirama had taken on 8 of the 9-tailed beasts alone. The classroom fell silent and all eyes turned to him. Even Iruka looked surprised while Mizuki's expression soured. Naruto grinned at the attention, pleased at having disrupted the peace. Later, during taijutsu practice, the courtyard hummed with anticipation as Kiba squared off against Sasuke. Sasuke's movements were refined and precise, while Kiba's were wild and impulsive. Naruto leaned against a tree with his arms behind his head, watching with an amused smirk. He teased Kiba about his frantic style, drawing laughter from the surrounding students. Kiba flushed and shot Naruto a glare, insisting Naruto could not do better. Naruto's smile masked the seriousness beneath. Kiba lunged desperately. Sasuke sidestepped, grabbed Kiba's arm, and flipped him onto his back. Naruto snickered as Kiba groaned and glared up at Sasuke's composed expression. Naruto offered a casual remark about having Kiba's back in the future, earning another seething glare. The students laughed and the banter continued. Naruto stepped up to face Shino with a widening smirk and made playful gestures toward the girls gathered along the sidelines. The gestures were light-hearted and meant to draw attention. Hinata's face flushed and she looked away, overwhelmed. Kiba scowled and urged Shino to take Naruto down. When the match began, Naruto launched into an exaggerated series of sloppy punches and kicks, each move leaving an obvious opening. Shino, stoic as ever, dodged and parried with ease, his expression unchanging. Naruto stumbled back dramatically, sitting up and brushing off dirt with a playful pout while the girls cheered. Kiba laughed outright at the spectacle. The practice continued as the day wore on. A classmate teased that it served Naruto right. Naruto shook his head, unfazed, and told everyone that he would need them to cheer louder next time, flashing a grin. The girls blushed with admiration and gathered around him. Shikamaru raised an eyebrow from the sidelines and observed that Naruto had a surprising charm. After academy hours, Naruto slipped through the shadows and quietly entered the Hokage's office. He pocketed several documents and left a scribbled note with an exaggerated drawing of himself sticking out his tongue. Later, Hiruzen sighed as he found the note and remarked that the boy was capable of evading even the Umbu. He sent an Umbu to fetch Naruto. When Naruto arrived, smiling with his hands behind his head, Hiruzen tried to look stern, but his expression softened. Hiruzen told Naruto that he should be grateful he was not punished for the pranks. Naruto thanked him and called him Gigi, teasing that he was too kind. Hiruzen pinched the bridge of his nose and wondered aloud what he was going to do with the boy. Naruto suggested using his talents for something more useful, naming espionage and assassination as possibilities. Hiruzen asked how Naruto could speak so calmly about taking lives. Naruto's smile faded and his eyes grew serious as he explained that he felt a darker drive pushing him toward dangerous work, a restlessness unlike that of other children. Hiruzen listened, his thoughts drifting to the weight the shinobi life placed on so many. He said that there was more to covert work than stealth. It required patience, precision, and the ability to control impulses. Sometimes success depended not on how quickly one struck but on how long one could wait and how well one could blend into the shadows. Naruto asked for 3 months to improve his skills and insisted he would be ready by then. Hiruzen studied him and questioned whether he planned to prepare alone. Naruto confidently insisted he would be fine without extra help. Hiruzen warned that espionage demanded knowledge beyond physical prowess, geography, the politics and tactics of different villages, and advised studying the bigger picture before going into the field. Seeing the determination in the boy, Hiruzen gave him 3 months and a soft chuckle, reminding him to return the documents he had taken. Naruto grinned and joked that he might bring them back or perhaps sell them, then departed. For the next 3 months, Naruto's life at the academy continued on the surface as before, but with a sharpened focus underneath. He kept up his playful persona while paying close attention in geography lessons, treating borders and regions like a map of possibilities. He trained his hand-to-hand combat, his speed, and his shuriken skills, and each night he pushed himself further in the mindscape with inner mentors urging him on. He refined his ability to move unseen and leave no trace. His pranks became practice runs in stealth and cunning, each one a step toward the covert operative he sought to become. On the day of reckoning, Hiruzen sat buried in paperwork when he suddenly felt something against the side of his neck. The atmosphere shifted, Naruto's presence appeared almost out of nowhere. Naruto remarked that they should work on their situational awareness, and Hiruzen saw that the Umbu in the room had been unaware until the last moment. The boy's stealth was on another level. Hiruzen asked if he was ready. Naruto revealed a kunai at the side of Hiruzen's neck as a practiced reminder of his skill and indicated that he was born ready. Hiruzen allowed a low, sharp laugh as he considered the implications of such readiness. He steeled himself and said that they would begin. Chapter 2: Into the Shadows. Naruto's life became a whirlwind of secrecy and covert operations, far removed from the carefree days of the academy. Officially, he was just another class clown at the academy. Unofficially, however, he was already cutting his teeth in the harsh reality of the ninja world, serving as a covert operative under the Hokage's orders. Naruto was no ordinary. His golden eyes carried the essence of Chika, his former self, and with that came a cold determination and lethal precision that set him apart. Guilt was foreign to him. Death was a tool, a necessary step in completing a mission. Hiruzen recognized this and acknowledged Naruto's unyielding potential without criticism. Naruto was a master of his craft, and every assignment proved it. Naruto's first mission seemed simple: scout for bandit activity along the outskirts of the Land of Fire. He crouched low in the underbrush, his golden eyes fixed on a ragged group of bandits gathered around a fire as they divided stolen goods. He reminded himself not to engage and recalled Hiruzen's instructions. He sketched the camp's layout in a notebook, noting patrol routes, weaponry, and weaknesses in their defenses. His sharp instincts kept him hidden even as one bandit wandered close to his position. When he returned to Konoha that night, Hiruzen commended his thoroughness. As time went on, Naruto's assignments became more demanding. He was sent to monitor a caravan rumored to be smuggling stolen goods and had to shadow the group for 3 days without being detected, sleeping in trees, scavenging for food, and evading the caravan guards. On the final night, he slipped into their camp and confirmed their illicit cargo, then caught the murmured plans for their next DLVI point before disappearing into the shadows. One mission took him to a border village suspected of harboring a rogue ninja. Disguised as a beggar, Naruto roamed the streets, noting every detail through his golden gaze. Hours later, he spotted a tall, scarred figure who moved with a ninja's precision despite ragged clothing. He tailed the man discreetly and pieced together his movements. That night, Naruto slipped into the man's quarters and discovered a stash of scrolls detailing plans for an attack on a nearby trade route. He memorized the contents and left without a trace. When Hiruzen reviewed his report, the old man gave an approving nod. Another mission required Naruto to infiltrate a rival lord's estate to locate a hidden ledger containing records of illegal transactions. Disguised as a servant, he slipped into the estate during a banquet and kept his head low while carrying trays and listening to conversations. When an opening presented itself, he left the crowd and entered the lord's private quarters. It took every ounce of focus to pick the lock on a desk drawer, retrieve the ledger, and copy its contents while avoiding patrolling guards. The thrill of the mission was intoxicating, but Naruto did not let it cloud his judgment. He left the estate without a trace and returned to report his findings. 5 months into his covert operations, Naruto received his first assassination mission. His target was a corrupt merchant funding criminal enterprises. For 2 days he shadowed the man, memorizing routines. On the third night, disguised as a servant, Naruto slipped into the merchant's chambers and approached silently. With a swift motion, Naruto neutralized the man, the merchant collapsed, and Naruto moved quickly to remove any sign of his presence before staging the scene to suggest a rival's involvement and disappearing into the night. When he returned, Hiruzen gave him a knowing look. No words of comfort or lectures followed. Naruto was efficient and understood the gravity of his work. Despite the danger and weight of his missions, Naruto maintained his role as the academy's class clown. He joked, pranked, and laughed with his classmates so that no one suspected his secret life. Beneath that mask, however, there was darkness. He was a shadow in the night, a blade poised to strike, and an unyielding force in service to the village. He carried out his tasks with ruthless efficiency, his golden eyes reflecting the predator he had become. Naruto had been working tirelessly, growing more adept in his role as Konoha's elite operative. On one day he ventured to the Land of Iron, a cold, snowy land known for its exceptional craft and swordsmanship. Disguised to blend into the bustling village life, he found himself outside a modest smithy. The warm glow of the forge lit the interior, and the rhythmic clanging of hammers on steel filled the air. Stepping inside, he scanned the array of weapons on display: swords, heavy axes, and intricately designed kunai, but none seemed to catch his interest. A broad-shouldered blacksmith with soot-streaked arms remarked that Naruto did not look like a swordsman. Naruto chuckled softly and acknowledged that he was not one to show off a flashy sword. He preferred to get his hands dirty. The blacksmith observed that the forge was not for dreamers, for they made tools for warriors and hunters rather than ornamental pieces. Naruto said he wanted a plain, durable blade, something reliable that could withstand a fight without shattering, because strength mattered more than appearance. The blacksmith studied him, then laughed and agreed to take the job, asking Naruto to return in a few days. A few days later, Naruto returned and the blacksmith handed over a weapon in a plain scabbard. Naruto drew it slowly to reveal a simple, unadorned sword with a sturdy edge, the exact sort of blade he had requested. The blacksmith asked why he wanted something so plain, noting that most customers sought swords that told a story or set them apart. Naruto ran his fingers lightly over the steel and said that the blade was simply a vessel. The blacksmith asked what the blade was a vessel for. Naruto did not answer. He slid the sword back into its scabbard, gave the blacksmith a small nod, and turned to leave. The silence he left behind was almost as heavy as the blade. As Naruto disappeared into the snowy streets, the blacksmith stood staring at the empty doorway. He had forged countless weapons, but there was something about this boy, something in his manner and confidence that made him uneasy. Whatever the boy's purpose, the blacksmith was sure of one thing: the plain blade would not remain plain for long. Chapter 3: Shadows Among the Rice Paddies. Naruto crouched low among tall stalks of rice, his golden eyes scanning the landscape. His movements were quiet and deliberate as he surveyed the area. Otogekure, the hidden network within the land of rice paddies, was more a scattered array of hideouts and laboratories than a village. Its true purpose was to serve as Orochimaru's twisted base. He had spent days tracking down the scattered sites, noting how they were concealed by natural barriers and disguised to blend into the terrain. Guards patrolled in erratic patterns, and snake-like sigils marked hidden tunnel entrances. As night fell, Naruto moved. His body slipped through the dark like a silent shadow, passing the sentries with practiced stealth. He paused only to confirm patrol routes, memorizing patterns with precise detail. Dim torches lit cold stone corridors where prisoners were chained or caged. Many bore signs of experimentation, with altered features and vacant stairs. A pang of pity passed through Naruto, then faded. Navigating the maze-like base, Naruto found Orochimaru's inner sanctum. Voices carried through the air and drew him closer. From the shadows he watched Orochimaru seated on a throne-like chair, his serpentine features lit by the flickering light. Across from him stood an elderly man wrapped in bandages over one eye and arm, flanked by ominous guards wearing blank, emotionless masks. Kurama identified the old vulture as Danzo Shimura, and Naruto grinned at the revelation, thinking that this made things more interesting. Orochimaru spoke with a smooth, venomous assurance that once he secured more resources the attack on Konoha would proceed as planned and that he intended to deal with his former sensei personally. Danzo answered coldly and calculatingly, asserting that his root forces would not interfere, that Hiruzen's days were numbered, and that he would assume the position of Hokage. Naruto watched them with a dangerous glint, anticipating the chance to end both of them. Reporting to Hiruzen. The old man sat behind his desk, the weight of the village etched into every line on his face. Hiruzen asked whether the mission had been a success, and Naruto smirked, replying that success depended on one's definition. He reported the layout of Otogekure, explaining that it was not a true village but a network of laboratories spread across the land of rice paddies under Orochimaru's control. At the mention of his former student, Hiruzen's expression darkened. Naruto warned that Orochimaru was planning an attack on Konoha and that the Hokage himself appeared to be the primary target. Hiruzen noted that Orochimaru had not changed. Naruto added that an elderly man wrapped in bandages surrounded by guards that resembled their Anbu was allied with Orochimaru. When Naruto described the man in detail, Hiruzen's face drained of color. He acknowledged the name Danzo Shimura, admitting that Danzo had been a former friend and village elder who had walked a dark path for years and that he had never imagined Danzo would go this far. Naruto offered to take care of Danzo. Hiruzen hesitated, saying the responsibility belonged to him, but Naruto insisted that he wanted the task. Hiruzen studied the boy, seeing both the mischievous prankster and the deadly shadow he had become, and with a sigh he relented and gave permission, cautioning Naruto not to make Danzo suffer. Naruto's chuckle carried an unsettling edge as he left, and Hiruzen sank into his chair, the weight of his decision heavy on him. Danzo had once been a comrade, and Hiruzen felt sorrow even as his resolve remained firm. He murmured an apology to the empty room and accepted the price of betrayal. Chapter 4. Hiruzen's office. Jiraiya entered and greeted the Hokage with a nod. Hiruzen returned a weary smile and thanked Jiraiya for the tip about Otogekure, calling it invaluable. Jiraiya asked what Hiruzen had discovered, and Hiruzen explained that Otogekure was not a proper village but a scattered network of hideouts and laboratories across the land of rice paddies, difficult to track and infiltrate. When Jiraiya pressed who was behind it, Hiruzen admitted with regret that it was someone Jiraiya knew well and that sparing him had been one of his greatest failures. The name Orochimaru hung unspoken between them. Jiraiya's fist tightened and he said he was not surprised. Danzo had always had his own agenda. Hiruzen cautioned that they must tread carefully, warning that Orochimaru was dangerous and that any hasty action could provoke an attack on Konoha. He added that one of his operatives had uncovered that Danzo was conspiring with Orochimaru. Jiraiya responded with a humorless smile and said he could not say he was surprised. When Jiraiya asked what they should do about Danzo, Hiruzen said not to concern himself. He had already assigned one of his best to handle the matter. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow but did not press further. Hiruzen attempted to lighten the mood by asking after Naruto and produced his crystal ball. Inside the orb, Naruto stood amid a lively group of classmates, and they chatted animatedly around him. Jiraiya smiled effortlessly as he divided his time among the younger ninjas, including Shikamaru, Kiba, Choji, and Shino. He chuckled and remarked that Naruto was popular and seemed to be enjoying life, which pleased him. Hiruzen smirked and observed that Jiraiya sounded relieved. Jiraiya rubbed the back of his head sheepishly and said it was good to see the boy acting like a child. He added that the boy still had much to learn. The three Sannin laughed together. Hiruzen cleared his throat and asked if Jiraiya had brought the latest volume of his writings. Jiraiya produced 2 books from his pouch and indicated that one was for Hiruzen and one for Kakashi. The Umbu in the room exchanged exasperated glances at their Hokage's indulgence. Hiruzen composed himself and suggested that Jiraiya visit Naruto. Jiraiya's grin faded into a more serious expression as he said he would perhaps visit next time. Before leaving, he withdrew a sum of ryo from his pouch and asked Hiruzen to give it to Naruto. Hiruzen accepted the money and watched Jiraiya disappear through the door. After Jiraiya left, Hiruzen sank back into his chair, the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He looked at the money in his hand and then out the window at the village he had sworn to protect, feeling a deepening worry about what Naruto was becoming and how Jiraiya would react if he ever learned the truth. Chapter 5. Naruto was summoned to the Hokage's office. Hiruzen greeted him warmly and handed him a hefty pouch of ryo, explaining that it was a bonus for his service. Naruto inspected the money with a hint of suspicion but decided not to press and accepted it with a thankful smile. Hiruzen's expression turned grave as he spoke about the matter of a suspected traitor. He instructed Naruto to attend the upcoming council meeting as an observer in the shadows and to follow Danzo afterward to complete the task that would follow. Naruto responded playfully with a mock salute, and Hiruzen sighed but allowed a small, wry smile. Later, Naruto went to Ichiraku to unwind. Ayame greeted him warmly and teased that he had been missed as a regular customer. Naruto offered a light-hearted explanation that he had been busy with training and preparing for the future. Tucci chuckled from the back and reminded him not to forget to make time for ramen and simple pleasures. Ayame advised Naruto to balance his training with time for himself and to be mindful of his maturity as he grew. Naruto accepted her advice earnestly. As he finished his meal and left, Naruto's carefree expression gave way to a more focused look. The mission involving Danzo approached, and he prepared himself to carry it out with precision. Chapter 6. Countdown to the council meeting. With no missions at hand and restlessness building, Naruto ventured into the deeper woods of Konoha, making his way to the Forest of Death. He moved through the dangerous territory with intense focus and speed, confronting the creatures that lived there. His strikes were precise and powerful, and he subdued numerous beasts without lingering. The sounds of the encounter echoed through the trees but no graphic detail remained. From a distance, Anko Mitarashi sensed a strong, unsettling energy and decided to investigate. When she arrived, she found the aftermath of a fierce confrontation. Many defeated beasts lay where the battle had taken place. The scene filled her with concern and a cautious curiosity. A figure stepped from the shadows. Naruto's appearance was altered, his hair unusually pale and his golden eyes striking against the disturbed backdrop of the forest. Anko noted his changed look and asked what had brought him here, maintaining a teasing edge as she twirled a kunai in her hand. Naruto acknowledged her question and introduced himself using an alias, bowing politely though a restrained intensity showed on his face. Anko observed that he did not seem to be here for sightseeing and suggested he explain his purpose. Naruto answered that he had come seeking a challenge, speaking with a calm, dark undertone and implying he was operating under Hiruzen's direction. Anko's interest sharpened, She observed that the scale of his action suggested he had not been satisfied by the forest's creatures alone. Naruto's gaze held a cool, assessing edge as he asked whether she thought she could match him. Anko accepted the unspoken challenge, tightening her grip on the kunai. The tension spiked, then Naruto stepped back and melted into the shadows. Anko landed lightly and scanned the area, calling out that running did not suit him. She then felt the sudden, chilling pressure of a blade at her neck. Her breath hitched as Naruto leaned close and told Anko that assassination was his specialty. Anko smiled, then performed a swift substitution. The kunai that had been at her neck vanished and a log appeared in its place. She reappeared several feet away and found the clearing empty. Naruto had gone again. His voice carried through the trees as he said he had enjoyed their encounter and hoped to meet her again soon. Anko stood still, heart racing, and told herself she would remember the name Chika Shihōin. Fishing in the forest, Naruto sat by the serene stream where he had once lived as a child, holding a fishing pole. The gentle sounds of water and rustling leaves contrasted sharply with the chaos he had caused earlier. He replayed the meeting with Anko in his mind and allowed himself a private smirk. He murmured that Anko Mitarashi was interesting as he pulled a fish from the water, then turned his thoughts to darker matters. Watching the ripples, his golden eyes gleamed with anticipation as he reminded himself that Danzo's schemes would soon be over. At the academy, Naruto kept up the routine of the clown perfectly, failing tests, pulling pranks, and making jokes to maintain his cover. No one suspected that the boy laughing and flirting with classmates was the same one preparing to end one of Konoha's most powerful figures. The council chamber was tense as the clan heads gathered for deliberation. Inoichi Yamanaka, Choza Akimichi, Shibi Aburame, Tsum Inazuka, Shikaka Nara, and Hayashi Hyuga sat alongside Hiruzen, Danzo, Koharu, and Hamura. From the shadows, Naruto observed, undetected as he leaned against the wall, his golden eyes calm and the faintest smirk on his lips. Hiruzen opened the meeting with a formal greeting and moved into recommendations for Jonin promotions. Shikaku noted that, based on recent missions, Kurenai Yuhi had displayed excellent tactical ability and recommended she be considered for promotion to Jonin. Tsum agreed, saying she had worked with Kurenai on collaborative missions and believed Kurenai had the temperament and skill set of a Jonin. Hiruzen replied that, while Kurenai's skills were noteworthy, her leadership experience was still lacking and proposed she take on additional missions of varying complexity before a final decision. The discussion shifted to village security. Shibi reported an increase in rogue activity near Konoha's borders and recommended allocating more sensor teams to monitor infiltration routes. Danzo responded that Root had already tightened border security and any rogue shinobi would be dealt with swiftly. Shikaku questioned whether Root's independent operations aligned with the village's priorities, prompting Danzo to bristle at the suggestion his loyalty was being questioned. Hiruzen intervened and instructed a coordinated effort, asking Danzo to continue Root's work while also implementing Shibi's suggestion. Naruto observed the exchange and thought that Danzo's arrogance knew no bounds. The council then addressed Orochimaru's growing influence. Hiruzen warned that Orochimaru's movements and experiments posed a danger to the shinobi nations. Koharu cautioned that aggression could provoke a larger conflict while the village was still recovering from past wars. Tsum argued against waiting passively for Orochimaru to act. Shikaku recommended gathering more intelligence before acting. Danzo remarked that eliminating Orochimaru earlier might have prevented the current threat, and Hiruzen privately reflected that both Danzo and Orochimaru should have been dealt with sooner. Naruto's smirk deepened as he watched and considered their hypocrisy. When the conversation turned to the upcoming Chunin exams, set to be hosted in Iwagakure, Choza expressed concern about sending their genin given Konoha's history with IWA. Inoichi countered that the exams were an opportunity to improve relations and showcase Konoha's strength, while also ensuring the candidate's safety. Hiruzen decided to send a capable escort team with the genin to demonstrate Konoha's growth and foster alliances. Finally, Danzo brought up Naruto's progress, criticizing the boy as a liability who failed exams, disrupted classes, and flirted too openly. Naruto almost laughed inwardly at the description, thinking how well his clowning covered his true purpose. Some dismissed him as merely a brat, while Hayashi insisted that if Naruto was to become a shinobi his performance must improve. Shikaku suggested the boy might be smarter than he appeared and that the facade could be intentional. Koharu recommended direct mentorship. Hiruzen assured the council that Naruto's progress would be addressed and that he would fulfill his potential. Naruto took mental note of who defended him and who did not, thinking that his abilities would prove them wrong and that Danzo's betrayals would not go unpunished. The meeting concluded with a review of village protocols and a reaffirmation of Konoha's goals. As the council members dispersed, Naruto remained hidden and let his mind race with plans. The stage was set for what was to come. Chapter 7. Naruto, cloaked in shadow, watched as Danzo left the council chambers, moving with his usual arrogance and unaware of the predator observing him. Two figures, Fu Yamanaka and Toryun Aburame, waited nearby for Danzo's exit. The elite root operatives fell in line without a word, flanking him like loyal hounds. With a simple gesture, the trio disappeared in a synchronized body flicker, leaving no trace of their departure. Naruto smirked, his golden eyes gleaming in the darkness, and he murmured to himself that they could run all they liked but they could not escape him. Using his spiritual senses, Naruto honed in on Danzo's unique energy signature. He followed the trail, weaving through Konoha's outskirts and into the dense forests. Eventually the trail led him to an inconspicuous entrance hidden beneath a thick canopy of trees. A lesser ninja might have overlooked it, but to Naruto it was painfully obvious. Naruto melded into the shadows until his presence vanished entirely. He infiltrated the hideout with precision, slipping past root operatives and traps like a ghost. His movements were silent, his breathing controlled, an assassin in his element. After navigating the hideout, he found himself outside Danzo instructing his soldiers. Naruto crouched in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Danzo, finally alone, settled into his private chamber and poured himself a cup of tea, unaware that someone lurked nearby. In an instant Naruto moved. His blade flashed and struck with such speed that Danzo had no time to react. Danzo's vision went dark as consciousness slipped away and he fell into unconsciousness. Unknown location. When Danzo woke, his head throbbed and his vision adjusted to the light of a cave. Disoriented, he staggered to his feet, taking in the cold, damp surroundings. Exiting the cave, he saw a boy standing at the edge of a cliff, gazing at the starlit sky. The serene scene clashed with the tension in the air. Danzo hurled a flurry of kunai at the boy's back, each thrown with lethal intent. Without turning, the boy dodged effortlessly, moving with such grace that it sent a chill down Danzo's spine. The boy slowly turned to face him, revealing golden eyes and a face painted like a clown. Danzo recognized him as Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto smirked and mocked that he looked like a clown. Danzo noted that Shikaku had been right about hidden strength and suspected Naruto had been listening in on the council meeting, a suspicion Naruto confirmed with a smug nod. Danzo regained his composure and offered Naruto a place at his side, claiming they could achieve greatness together. Naruto declined indifferently and said he already answered to Hiruzen. Danzo grimaced and suggested Hiruzen had been secretly training the boy, while Naruto said he was largely self-taught. Danzo retracted earlier criticisms and praised Naruto's deception, reflexes, and stealth. Naruto accepted the compliment, then hardened his expression and accused Danzo Shimura of aiding the traitor Orochimaru, stating he had come to execute him. Danzo froze in shock, then asked how Naruto knew. Naruto's silence was confirmation enough that Hiruzen had ordered the action. Danzo scoffed at the idea of sending a youth, but Naruto warned that the boy could have finished him earlier and that mercy should not be confused for weakness. Danzo sneered that leaving him alive was a mistake. The tension between them tightened like a drawn blade. Chapter 8, Clash of Shadows. The air between Naruto and Danzo crackled with tension, their gazes locked like steel. Naruto vanished from sight, his speed leaving only a faint blur. His first move was a swift elbow aimed at Danzo's throat, which the elder ninja narrowly avoided with a twist. Danzo retaliated with a sweeping slash of his short blade. Naruto ducked as the blade cut overhead and countered with a spinning kick. Danzo raised his arm to block, grunting as the force drove him back a step. He formed a series of hand seals and the air around him began to swirl with violent energy. Danzo unleashed a wind technique called the vacuum sphere, sending a barrage of razor-edged gusts through the air. Naruto weaved between the attacks, closed the distance in an instant, and delivered a powerful strike aimed at Danzo's ribs. Danzo deflected the blow with his short blade, forming a focused wind attack that sent him skidding back, his feet digging furrows in the dirt. He lunged with the blade again, each strike swift and calculated to find blind spots. Naruto parried the assaults with his forearms, each block sending shockwaves through the terrain. He pressed forward relentlessly and reappeared in front of Danzo, delivering a hard strike to the stomach that Danzo barely blocked, forcing a grunt from him. Danzo admitted that Naruto was strong but warned that brute force alone would not be enough. He leapt back, formed another set of seals mid-air, and released a larger wind technique he called the vacuum great sphere. The massive gust carved into the ground and forced Naruto to backflip away, tearing up the terrain and leaving jagged scars. Naruto taunted that Danzo relied on tricks, then vanished again, his movements almost imperceptible. Danzo scanned for movement and spun, releasing another wind slash toward a faint sound behind him. Naruto's palm struck Danzo's chest before the wind slash connected, sending Danzo skidding across the battlefield. He tumbled before regaining his footing, breathing heavy but steady. Danzo ended the exchange and performed a summoning, slamming his thumb to the ground. The earth trembled and a massive summoned creature appeared, opening a great maw and creating an immense suction force. Danzo commanded the creature to consume everything in its path, and it inhaled, pulling in rocks, debris, and nearby trees. Naruto braced himself, his feet digging into the ground to resist the pull. He warned the summoned beast that it would not stop him. He sprang forward, cutting through the torrent of air like a blade. Twisting midair, he drove a glowing fist into the creature's trunk, the impact sending a shockwave across the clearing and momentarily halting the suction. The beast roared in pain but was not deterred. Its trunk lashed out to crush Naruto. With blinding speed, Naruto dodged and leapt onto the creature's back, delivering a rapid series of blows that sent electricity-like pulses rippling through its form. Danzo watched the exchange with an unreadable expression and noted that the display was impressive, though he challenged Naruto to see how long he could last against both of them. He then unleashed a barrage of slicing wind blades that converged on Naruto. Naruto jumped from the creature's back, twisting in midair to evade the onslaught, and landed a few feet away in a low crouch, ready to pounce again. He rose to his full height, scarf blowing ominously, and called the beast back to its proper place in the fight. Danzo, narrowing his eyes, hinted that he would show the difference between mere strength and true power. The battle continued under the pale moonlight, the ground shaking with every clash, their fierce determination fueling a storm that would rage until only one stood victorious. Chapter 9. The Undying Adversary. The summoned beast roared in fury. Despite Naruto's relentless assault in the previous clash, the creature's determination to follow Danzo's command burned fiercely in its glowing eyes. The battlefield was scarred with gouges and scattered debris, and the air crackled with residual energy from their earlier skirmish. Naruto cracked his neck and moved deliberately, daring the beast to come at him again. He ordered the beast to stand down and leave the duel to him. Danzo, standing at a distance with his hands clasped together, warned that the creature's resilience was not to be underestimated. The beast charged again, its maw opening to create another vacuum-like pull. Naruto braced himself, his body glowing faintly with spiritual energy. With a burst of speed, he surged forward against the force, defying the suction as his feet tore up the ground. He closed the distance in seconds and delivered a thunderous punch to the beast's stomach. The impact reverberated through the air, and the creature reeled back, shaking its massive head. Naruto moved his palm forward and fired a crimson orb of energy that collided with the beast's chest in a fiery explosion. The creature roared and trembled as it struggled to maintain its footing. Danzo grimaced and commanded the creature to pull back. It turned toward its master, but Naruto was relentless. He leapt onto its back and began a rapid series of strikes, lightning dancing around his fists and creating shockwaves across the creature's massive form. Naruto extended a finger and released a concentrated bolt of lightning that struck the creature's flank. With a final pained roar, the summoned beast collapsed, shimmered, and dissipated into smoke, returning to its realm. Naruto landed gracefully and fixed his gaze on Danzo, declaring that the distractions were over and it was Danzo's turn. Danzo remained outwardly calm but clearly irritated. He released the seal on his arm and slowly unwound the bandages, revealing an array of implanted red, spiraling eyes embedded along his flesh. Naruto warned that Danzo had gone too far and that there would be no coming back from this. Danzo's lips curled into a sinister grin as he scoffed that Naruto did not understand the sacrifices made to protect the village and dismissed him as a child playing at being a ninja. Without another word, Danzo formed a series of hand signs and unleashed a massive sphere of wind that surged toward Naruto, far stronger than before. Naruto vanished in a blink of swift movement and reappeared behind Danzo, driving a crushing elbow into his back. Danzo stumbled but retaliated instantly, causing the ground beneath Naruto to rise violently into jagged stone walls in an attempt to trap him. Naruto answered by firing a blue torrent of energy that shattered the earthen barriers before they could fully form, then darted forward and struck with a spinning kick aimed at Danzo's ribs. Danzo responded with a high-pressure stream of water that forced Naruto to leap back, the water cutting through the earth like a blade and leaving a deep trench. He then shifted to fire, launching a series of blazing fireballs that streaked toward Naruto and ignited the ground where they landed. Naruto zigzagged through the barrage to evade the flames and closed the distance, landing a powerful punch to Danzo's chest that sent the older shinobi hurtling into the ground with a heavy thud. Naruto approached cautiously, scanning for any sign of movement and taunted that the fight was over. His senses were sharp, but nothing prepared him for the sight of Danzo standing several feet away, alive and unscathed, a twisted smirk on his face. Naruto reacted with disbelief, insisting that Danzo should be defeated, but Danzo chuckled that death was a luxury he could bypass. They clashed again, their techniques shaking the battlefield. Danzo unleashed a barrage of elemental assaults while Naruto met them with precise movements, his mastery of hand-to-hand combat allowing him to deflect and counter with devastating force. In a blur of motion, Naruto closed the distance and struck Danzo's chest with an explosive blow that sent the elder ninja into a cavern wall, the impact shaking loose debris from above. As dust settled and Naruto approached the crumpled form, Danzo's body shimmered and he reappeared a few paces away, the implanted eyes along his arm glowing faintly. Naruto demanded an explanation, suspicious of the impossible recovery. Danzo brushed off his robe and taunted that brute strength would not be enough to defeat him. Danzo gave Naruto no time to think. His hands together in a rapid sequence of seals and unleashed a devastating blast of wind that obliterated the surrounding terrain. Naruto leaped back to narrowly avoid the destructive force. Before he could recover, Danzo formed another set of seals and sent out blades of cutting wind that shot forward in rapid succession, slicing through stone and aiming directly for Naruto. Naruto twisted and turned, moving like water as he dodged the onslaught. One blade grazed his cheek. He invoked binding technique number 39, Flaming Shield, raising a spinning shield of light to block the remaining strikes. The shield absorbed the wind blades, but Danzo remained relentless. Danzo slammed his hand into the ground and unleashed wood release, tree-binding restraint. Thick wooden tendrils burst from the earth, snaking toward Naruto with alarming speed. The roots coiled and twisted, attempting to ensnare him. Naruto leaped into the air to evade the initial assault, but the wood followed, growing and expanding like a living creature. He twisted mid-air, slamming his heel into the nearest tendril and shattering it. He landed gracefully, only to be met with another wave of roots. Naruto roared that it was enough and moved like lightning, his strikes pulverizing the wood with practiced precision. He surged forward, weaving through Danzo's defenses, and his fist struck Danzo's jaw with a crushing impact that sent the elder ninja flying. Danzo collapsed, motionless, then shimmered and reappeared behind Naruto moments later. Danzo acknowledged that Naruto was far more skilled than he had expected. Naruto turned, his expression dark, and said that Danzo was starting to anger him. The pattern continued. Naruto defeated Danzo again and again, each time more decisively, and each time Danzo revived, the Sharingan on his arm glowing slightly dimmer. Frustration boiled within Naruto as he demanded how Danzo was doing this. Danzo smirked and said that a ninja should never reveal his secrets. Naruto's eyes darted to the Sharingan embedded in Danzo's arm, and he realized those eyes were connected to the trick. Danzo's expression tightened, and he warned that even if Naruto had figured it out, it changed nothing. 5 Sharingan remained open on Danzo's arm, each representing a chance to reverse his defeat. Despite his defiance, Naruto had already depleted a large portion of his chakra. He stood motionless a few feet away, his gaze fixed on Danzo, and asked if they were done playing games or if Danzo had another trick to show before he ended this. Danzo answered that if brute force would not work, then he would break Naruto another way. Danzo removed the bandages from his right eye and activated divine mind manipulation, locking eyes with Naruto. Naruto froze briefly as a strange sensation washed over him. Danzo attempted to implant a command that Naruto would serve him and abandon his own will. The impression shattered as a surge of power erupted from Naruto. Lightning flared across his body, dispelling the illusion, and Kurama's roar echoed in his mind. Danzo's eyes widened in shock when Naruto stepped forward, unaffected. Danzo realized that his mind control had failed and acknowledged the strength of Naruto's will. For the first time in the battle, Naruto reached for the sword at his waist. He gripped the hilt of a blade called Thunder Armor and murmured that it had been a while since he had needed it. His golden eyes glinted as he unsheathed the blade and the metallic ring echoed through the cavern. Danzo watched warily and said that a blade would not be enough to defeat him. Naruto chuckled and indicated that he had not been entirely serious. He commanded the Thunder Armor to shroud him in thunder. The blade dissolved into pure energy, transforming into a storm of lightning that enveloped Naruto's body. The intense glow illuminated the cavern, arcs of electricity dancing across his figure. The shroud amplified his presence. Danzo shielded his face from the blinding light and noted that the cloak resembled the Reikage's lightning chakra cloak but felt more refined. The clash continued. Danzo launched himself backward, forming a series of seals to unleash wind release, vacuum wave, sending a crescent-shaped blade of wind aimed at Naruto's lightning-clad form. Naruto remained unmoving as the wind attack collided with the electric shroud and dissipated harmlessly. He countered with Thunder God's Fong, swinging his arm to send a shockwave of lightning that split the ground as it raced toward Danzo. The elder shinobi leapt aside to avoid the strike, and the blast reduced a boulder behind him to scorched rubble. Danzo clenched his fists and performed seals to call forth fire release, Great Blaze Devastation. A massive torrent of flames surged forward like a wildfire. The lightning surrounding Naruto intensified into a protective barrier. The flames struck the electric shield and dispersed into harmless embers. Before Danzo could recover, Naruto vanished and reappeared behind him, driving a crackling fist into his back. The impact sent Danzo into a cavern wall, and he staggered to the ground, the Sharingan spinning wildly. He tried to rise, but his body failed him. Naruto observed that he had scored one more defeat, and Danzo's form shimmered and vanished, reappearing a few meters away, unharmed. Danzo growled and formed more seals, calling forth would release, Great Forest Bloom. Massive roots erupted from the ground, twisting and coiling toward Naruto like serpents. Naruto smirked and raised his hand, acting a thunder barrier. A dome of lightning expanded around him, disintegrating the roots on contact and forcing Danzo to retreat. Naruto said coldly that borrowed power paled against true strength, and Danzo, desperation flickering, unleashed wind release, vacuum needle barrage. Naruto blurred and reappeared behind Danzo, driving a crushing knee into his back that sent him sprawling forward. Lightning danced around Naruto as he prepared his next move, invoking lightning current. He vanished into a series of afterimages that surrounded Danzo. Each strike landed faster than the last and thunder filled the battlefield. Danzo's attempts to block proved futile as the barrage overwhelmed him, leaving him battered and scorched. One of the Sharingan on Danzo's arm closed, and his body flickered as he revived once more. Naruto's gaze remained cold as he remarked that Danzo was beginning to run out of eyes. Danzo demanded how many more times Naruto could cheat death before he would rip his arm off. He gritted his teeth and moved quickly, performing a sequence of seals to unleash an earth technique called Earthquake Slam. The ground beneath Naruto erupted, jagged stone spikes shooting upward in an attempt to pin him. Naruto dashed forward, dodging each spike until he stood in front of the elder, his palm glowing with concentrated lightning energy. He struck with a technique of pure lightning fist, the blow creating a deafening shockwave that sent Danzo hurtling through the air. Naruto pursued him, following with a spinning kick that slammed Danzo back into the ground and left a shallow crater where he landed. Danzo lay still for a moment while Naruto landed beside him and counted 3 opponents down to himself. The motion did not last. The elder reappeared a heartbeat later, breathing hard and shifting tactics without hesitation. Danzo activated a water technique, forming a massive water dragon that surged toward Naruto with a thunderous roar. In response, Naruto's lightning armor shattered into dozens of glowing shards that scattered across the battlefield, each shard sparking with electric pulses. The fragments neutralized the water dragon before it could reach him. Danzo stumbled back, his chakra reserves visibly strained as a shard from Naruto's armor struck him. A crimson eye on his arm flared as he invoked a forbidden reality-altering technique to avoid death, and he recovered enough to press the fight. Naruto advanced with deliberate steps and told Danzo that he had run out of excuses and time. Danzo unleashed one final wind technique, a hurricane-like vortex that tore through the field. Naruto stood fast and summoned a bow and arrow of pure lightning. The lightning arrow flew through the howling winds and struck Danzo at the center of the vortex. The resulting explosion was tremendous, and Danzo was hurled back and crashed to the ground. As the air cleared, Danzo's form flickered. The crimson eye closed for the last time. He tried to crawl away, but Naruto reached him instantly. Naruto told Danzo that he had caused enough suffering and raised his hand, lightning coiling around it. With one decisive strike, Naruto ended the fight. Danzo made a final, strained sound and then fell motionless. Naruto stood over him, the last echoes of his lightning armor fading. He returned his sword to its sheath, his expression hard and unyielding. He told himself that this was for all the lives Danzo had ruined. As the storm clouds began to part, the battlefield grew quiet, a solemn reminder of the consequences of corruption and power. Chapter 11. Mission complete. The battlefield settled into silence. Smoke from Naruto's final lightning strike hung in the air and the ground where Danzo had stood was scorched and blackened. Naruto's lightning armor faded entirely and his sword, Kaminari Yoroi, became still and ordinary once more. He allowed himself a brief, intense smile that passed quickly as he regained his composure and told himself the mission was complete. With a flicker, he vanished into the night. Hiruzen's office. A Shadow's report. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the 3rd village leader, sat buried in a mountain of paperwork. He paused and reached for his pipe when he sensed a familiar presence and acknowledged Naruto's arrival without looking up. Naruto stepped from the shadows. The covert operatives in the room were unfazed by his silent entrance. His ability to bypass detection was well known among them. Hiruzen demanded a report. Naruto lowered his head and quietly reported that he had failed. Hiruzen froze, pen halted mid-stroke, and the operatives shifted uneasily. Naruto had never failed a mission before. Hiruzen asked what had happened. Naruto explained that he had infiltrated Danzo's hideout and incapacitated him, then admitted that simply removing Danzo would not have satisfied him. He said he had taken Danzo to a secluded location to confront him directly. When Danzo tried to escape, Naruto pursued him. Hiruzen, incredulous at the suggestion that Danzo would run, began to prepare a manhunt, but Naruto then clarified with a darker edge that he had struck Danzo with a decisive lightning attack that resulted in Danzo's elimination. Hiruzen warned Naruto not to make jokes during a mission report and reminded him of the seriousness of the matter. Naruto feigned remorse and promised to be more professional. Hiruzen dismissed him, left to consider the implications of what he had been told. Council meeting. The council chamber buzzed until Hiruzen called the room to order and announced a grave matter. Danzo Shimura had betrayed the village. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the council members. Shikaku asked whether there was proof. Hiruzen explained that he had sent an operative to investigate the newly formed Sound Village and found not a proper settlement but a network of hideouts and laboratories belonging to the traitor Orochimaru. The mention of Orochimaru chilled the room. Hiruzen reported that his operative had witnessed Danzo meeting with Orochimaru. Tsum Inazuka scoffed and declared that she had long suspected Danzo's corruption. Inoichi asked whether Danzo had been captured. Hiruzen shook his head and stated that Danzo had been eliminated by the operative. Shikaku leaned forward, noting that the operative must be exceptionally skilled to infiltrate Orochimaru's facilities and remove Danzo without detection. Hiruzen confirmed only that the operative was uniquely skilled and offered no further details. Tsum made a dismissive sound as the council digested the ramifications. A council member declared that whoever had acted deserved a medal and that there was one less snake in Konoha. Hayashi Hyuga frowned but remained silent, his expression unreadable. Hiruzen watched the room, allowed the conversation to continue for a few moments, then raised his hand to restore order. Hiruzen stated that Danzo's actions were a stain on Konoha's honor and that the matter would remain classified, with the villagers never being told the details of the betrayal. The council members nodded in agreement, though some looked dissatisfied. Hiruzen leaned back in his chair under the weight of the day's revelations and declared the meeting adjourned. Chapter 12. Graduation and a Deadly Test. Naruto kept up his double life, by day an academy student who barely passed his classes, and by night one of Konoha's most skilled, secret operatives, taking on missions others would not attempt. Time moved quickly, and the academy graduation arrived. Naruto did just enough to pass without drawing attention, performing the clone technique adequately. His instructors offered guarded congratulations, thinking his performance below potential. His female classmates, however, admired him and praised him enthusiastically. One classmate complimented Naruto on his skill, and another offered congratulations, cheeks flushed with excitement. Naruto scratched the back of his head and thanked them, leaning into the attention with a playful grin that made the group of girls swoon. As he prepared to leave the academy grounds, Instructor Mizuki called out to him. Naruto paused, his instincts on alert. Mizuki had always given him an uneasy feeling despite his affable facade. Mizuki approached and offered a proposition, a chance to skip ahead to the mid-level ninja rank through a secret test that could fast-track his promotion. Naruto masked his suspicion and pretended enthusiasm while inwardly weighing his options and suppressing rising anger. Mizuki explained that Naruto would need to steal the forbidden scroll of sealing and learn a technique from it to earn the promotion. Naruto played along, promising he would not disappoint, and Mizuki placed an approving hand on his shoulder before Mizuki left. Hiruzen's office. Hiruzen sat at his desk and watched as Ebisu scolded Konohamaru for another failed attempt at an assassination exercise. Ebisu lectured that such behavior was unbecoming of a young noble, and Konohamaru insisted he would do better next time. Naruto stepped from the shadows, amusement in his golden eyes, and commented that the village leader seemed to have his hands full. Ebisu stiffened when he recognized that Naruto was the tailed beast host. Naruto then teased Konohamaru, suggesting that if he truly wanted tips on an assassination technique, Naruto would succeed on the first try. The elite covert unit bodyguards tensed, and Hiruzen sighed, understanding the boy's bluff all too well. Naruto then vanished and reappeared close to Hiruzen, making a bold show by producing a kunai and startling the room, demonstrating his skill without harming anyone. Konohamaru watched in awe and begged Naruto to train him. Hiruzen intervened, explaining that Naruto had secret duties and would not have time to take on a student. Naruto offered a brief, playful refusal. Hiruzen dismissed Ebisu and Konohamaru, sending them from the office. Once they had left, Hiruzen asked Naruto why he had come. The boy's jesting manner faded into seriousness as he revealed that Mizuki had offered a secret test that involved stealing the forbidden scroll of sealing. Hiruzen's expression darkened. Mizuki had been under suspicion for years after teammates had begun dying under mysterious circumstances during missions. Hiruzen instructed Naruto to follow the scheme but to let Hiruzen set a trap. Naruto would be given a fake scroll so they could see how far Mizuki would go. Naruto resisted the idea of being controlled, But Hiruzen relented and allowed Naruto to handle Mizuki once they had the information they needed. Naruto's grin turned grim and determined rather than cruel. The elite covert unit members watched uneasily. Naruto's intensity was familiar, but it still unsettled them. Hiruzen studied the boy with concern, noting the increasing edge to his demeanor and wondering how long Naruto could keep it under control. Naruto left the office, promising that the mission would be interesting, and slipped back into the shadows. Hiruzen leaned back and thought about the danger of a powerful asset that could also harm those around him. Chapter 13, Shadows of the Night. Mizuki waited in a small clearing deep in the forest outside the village beneath the moonlight, growing impatient as he paced and muttered about the absentee recruit. He worried about wasted time and muttered expletives in frustration. A deep, otherworldly voice answered from the shadows, asking who dared disturb its rest. Mizuki froze and scanned the shifting darkness for the source. He called out, trying to sound confident and demanding Naruto show himself. The voice replied with cold curiosity, asking who the Naruto Mizuki mentioned might be. Shadowy figures began to move through the trees with startling speed, blurring at the edges and giving the illusion of distorted forms. Mizuki spun, trying to follow them, and demanded that whatever game was being played stop. The scene unfolded like a tense, stylized confrontation drawn from an animated tale, the figures darting and weaving in swift, non-graphic motion as Mizuki braced himself for whatever came next. Mizuki demanded that whoever lurked in the shadows reveal themselves. The darkness stilled, then a terrifying figure stepped forward, a spirit-like being cloaked in black mist, its translucent form shifting and hollow eyes burning red. The sight felt like a probe into Mizuki's very soul. Mizuki clenched his fists and tried to dispel what he thought was an illusion. He called for Kai and released chakra to break a possible genjutsu, but nothing changed. The spirit chuckled, its sound mocking and cold. It taunted him, asking if he had believed it was only an illusion. The spirit fixed its stare on Mizuki in a way that made him feel every secret laid bare. He tried to step back, but his legs felt as heavy as lead. The spirit spoke with a low, guttural accusation, claiming that Mizuki had planned to use Naruto Uzumaki to steal the forbidden scroll of sealing and intended to kill the boy afterward. Mizuki's breath hitched and sweat beaded on his forehead as fear crept in. He asked what the spirit meant. The spirit accused him of wanting the scroll to further a betrayal. Mizuki's silence confirmed the accusation in the spirit's eyes. The spirit reached through him and a chilling pressure raced through Mizuki's chest. The spirit hissed that Mizuki was unworthy of the darkness he wielded, then struck him with a brutal, non-graphic blow to the temple. Mizuki collapsed into unconsciousness. Hiruzen watched the episode through his crystal ball, expression carefully controlled while the ANBU in the room shifted uneasily. Hiruzen observed that Mizuki's methods were unconventional but effective, though he worried about the bloodlust that had surfaced. One of the ANBU asked whether Mizuki would reveal the truth under interrogation. Hiruzen responded that he would, and that Ibiki would be able to pry it out. He narrowed his eyes as the spirit faded and the unconscious Mizuki was led away by ANBU. Mizuki came to in a dim interrogation room, wrists bound behind his back, a single bulb swinging overhead and casting uneasy shadows. His head throbbed, and his surroundings were slow to resolve. Across the table, Ibiki Marino sat with his scarred face unreadable, studying Mizuki with the cold focus of the village's interrogation chief. Mizuki croaked a question about his location. Ibiki replied that he was in hell and that Ibiki would be his guide. He moved directly to the matter at hand, demanding to know why Mizuki wanted the forbidden scroll of sealing. Mizuki insisted he did not know what was being referred to and denied wrongdoing, claiming his teammates were simply incompetent and unable to handle their missions. Ibiki left the room with a grim expression, then returned and gestured toward a tray of instruments. He examined a kunai, letting its presence press into the charged silence, and demanded answers about Mizuki's teammates. He accused Mizuki of lying, noting reports that the deaths had looked suspicious and pointing out that Mizuki had been the sole survivor. Mizuki denied killing them, insisting they had been weak and held him back. To underscore the seriousness of the investigation, an ANBU produced a folder of photographs. Ibiki laid the images on the table, showing the state of Mizuki's former comrades after a violent encounter that suggested foul play rather than a simple battlefield tragedy. The photos were disturbing but presented no graphic detail. Mizuki stared at them, breathing growing ragged, and continued to maintain he had not intentionally caused their deaths. Ibiki slammed his hand onto the table and ordered an end to the evasions. Under the pressure, Mizuki admitted that he had not meant for his teammates to die but revealed that he had seen them as obstacles to his advancement and had resented being overlooked. Ibiki signaled to the ANBU that they had made progress and instructed them to return Mizuki to his cell. As they dragged him away, Mizuki muttered in a fractured state, his mind shaken by the interrogation. Ibiki remained impassive, convinced there was more to uncover and determined to find it. Chapter 14. Predator Unleashed. The corridor was quiet except for Inoichi Yamanaka's footsteps as he approached Hiruzen's desk. He had just finished probing Mizuki's mind and brought troubling news. Inoichi reported to the Hokage that Mizuki had been working for Orochimaru, passing information and planning to steal the scroll to gain favor with the Sannin. He also confirmed that Mizuki harbored deep resentment toward the village. Hiruzen drew on his pipe and exhaled a cloud of smoke, then asked for further detail. Inoichi added that Mizuki had confessed to killing his teammates, rationalizing the acts as necessary for his own advancement, and that he held a deep hatred for the village. Hiruzen absorbed the information, the weight of betrayal settling over the office as plans to address the threat formed behind his calm facade. Inoichi hesitated when Naruto Uzumaki's name was mentioned. Ibiki stood off to the side with his arms folded. Inoichi observed that Naruto did not seem to care about the consequences of his actions and suggested the boy was already too far gone. Ibiki folded his arms and listened as Inoichi agreed, then asked the Hokage if he was certain about the unusual decision to leave Mizuki's cell door open. Hiruzen tapped his pipe against the ashtray and, with a grim expression, said that Mizuki would not get far. Inoichi narrowed his eyes and asked whether Hiruzen was counting on the operative who had dealt with Danzo. Hiruzen did not answer directly. A faint, knowing smile touched his lips as he said that Konoha's predator did not rest and that Mizuki's fate was already sealed. Ibiki asked what predator was meant, and Inoichi replied that the matter was classified, assuring him that Mizuki would not be a problem for long. Despite the pain radiating through his battered body, Mizuki ran as fast as he could after slipping out of the open cell. He had not stopped since then. His breath came in ragged gasps and his only thought was escape. The dense forest outside Konoha blurred past him as he pushed forward in the darkness. Sudden, sharp pain in his shoulder forced him to his knees. He clutched at the wound and fell to the ground. A slow voice from the shadows warned him that running would not save him. Mizuki looked up and met the cool, unsettling gaze of Naruto Uzumaki, who stood calm and composed with a sword catching the moonlight at his side. Mizuki accused Naruto and vowed to kill him. In response, Mizuki activated the cursed seal on his body. His form shifted into a more feral, bestial state, faster and stronger, his instincts raw. He roared and charged with feral speed. Naruto remained composed and avoided the attacks with practiced agility, his posture unbothered. Mizuki continued to lash out, growing increasingly frustrated as his efforts failed to land. He realized his strength was waning and that his injuries were taking their toll. Naruto noted matter-of-factly that Mizuki was losing ground and asked how long he could keep going in his condition. Mizuki demanded to be left alone and lunged in a desperate attack. Naruto moved with precise control and delivered a decisive, non-graphic strike that incapacitated Mizuki and ended the confrontation. Mizuki collapsed, the fight over. Back in the Hokage's office, Hiruzen watched the scene through his crystal ball and sighed, commenting quietly that another loose end had been tied up and wondering at what cost. The ANBU in the room exchanged uneasy glances. Naruto's ruthlessness was apparent and, though effective for the village's interests, it marked a dangerous path for the boy. Hiruzen extinguished his pipe and, with a heavy heart, repeated that Konoha's predator did not rest. Chapter 15. The farce unfolds. The mission begins. Kakashi, Genma, Rado, and Iwashi stood before the Hokage as Hiruzen slid a mission scroll across his desk and assigned them to escort a wealthy client and her butler back to their home country, noting it was a simple B-rank mission. Genma flicked a sunban and commented that the country of tea as a destination should be a breeze. Hiruzen nodded but warned them to be on their guard. The team departed, unaware of the predator lying in wait. 2 days later, the Toad Sage strolled into the Hokage's office and greeted Hiruzen, asking whether Naruto had passed his graduation. Hiruzen, exhaling smoke from his pipe, confirmed that the boy had surprised his doubters. Jiraiya's smile faded as he leaned forward and relayed disturbing intelligence. Kakashi, Genma, Rado, Jiraiya himself, and anyone connected to Minato had bounties on their heads. Hiruzen found the news unsurprising, but grew serious when Jiraiya specified who had taken the job: the Zoldyck family. A hush settled over the office as even the ANBU stiffened. Hiruzen's eyes darkened at the mention of the elite assassins. He recalled his last perilous encounter and admitted to himself that the situation was bad. Jiraiya added that he worried Naruto might also be targeted. Hiruzen noted that the boy did not bear a striking paper trail tying him to Minato and that those who knew of his parentage remained silent. Jiraiya agreed that Kakashi and the others must be cautious, reminding Hiruzen that the Zoldicks were masters of disguise and deception. At that moment, Hiruzen realized it was no coincidence that Kakashi, Genma, Rado, and Iwashi had been chosen for the escort mission. A chill of recognition passed through Hiruzen as he told his hidden ANBU and Jiraiya to hurry to the land of tea. Within minutes, Jiraiya and the ANBU departed, leaving Hiruzen alone to summon Naruto. Naruto arrived soon after, his presence unmistakable even in his silent, stealthy approach. Hiruzen relayed the details. Naruto's grin widened as he asked whether he could handle the assassins as he pleased. Hiruzen nodded. Naruto's smirk turned fierce. He could hardly wait. Hiruzen reminded him to disguise himself, and with a lazy salute Naruto vanished. The ambush. Kakashi, Genma, Rado, and Iwashi had been on edge throughout the mission. Escorting the client and her butler through bandit-infested territory was expected, but something felt wrong. As they fended off another wave of bandits, Kakashi wiped his blade and asked the client if she was all right. She bowed slightly and indicated she was fine. Before anyone could relax, the butler reached into his pocket and discreetly produced a small coin. The coin shot from his fingers at blinding speed and struck the spot where Kakashi had been standing with a sharp impact. Genma, Rado, and Iwashi froze in alarm. Iwashi broke the silence, swearing in disbelief. The client sighed and announced that it was time to end the farce. Her form shimmered and shifted. In moments the woman was gone, replaced by a tall, expressionless man with jet-black hair and dark, pupil-less eyes that showed no emotion. The butler bowed with measured politeness and introduced his master as Illumi, then gave his own name as Goto and said he would handle the remaining Konoha ninja. Illumi, unfazed, told his subordinate that he could take one of them and the rest would be his. The Konoha ninja tensed. Goto bowed and acknowledged the order. Before anyone could react, Kakashi's body dissolved into smoke and a log lay where he had stood. Genma breathed a word of relief, recognizing the substitution technique. Illumi asked how long they had known the deception. Kakashi narrowed his eyes and said he had suspected something was off from the start. Illumi slowly clapped and called them clever in an emotionless tone. Then his expression darkened and a wave of killing intent rolled out across the area. The air grew heavy. Genma's fingers tightened around his needles, Rado's grip on his blade hardened, and Iwashi's breath hitched. A true predator had entered the fight, and they were not sure they would survive. Chapter 16. Dance of Coins and Needles. The air near the tea fields thickened as Illumi's killing intent spread like a suffocating fog. Kakashi's Sharingan rotated, his breath steadying despite the pressure. Goto bowed to Illumi and confirmed he would act. Coins gleamed between his fingers, catching the fading light. Genma shifted a needle to the corner of his mouth and scanned the area warily. He warned Kakashi that this was not normal killing intent. Rado tightened his grip and lowered his stance. Iwashi, sweat beading on his brow, muttered that he had no idea what they were up against. Illumi tilted his head but showed no emotion, noting that they were still standing and then signaling to begin. Goto's hands blurred as he unleashed a barrage of coins that screamed through the air like bullets, aimed at Iwashi's torso. Kakashi ordered them to scatter and threw a throwing knife to deflect one with a metallic clang. Iwashi dove aside, but a rifling coin grazed his shoulder and he hit the dirt with a grunt. Genma retaliated by spitting a volley of needles. Goto's reflexes matched them, slinging coins to intercept each projectile. Sparks flew as metal collided midair. Rado charged with his blade slashing. Goto sidestepped and slammed his palm into the ground, forcing jagged stone to erupt and creating a spiked wall that forced Rado to leap back, his blade nicking the rock. Kakashi formed hand signs and unleashed a high-pressure water blast from his mouth aimed at Goto. The butler twisted as his coins pulsed faintly with chakra. Where water met metal, an explosion of mist masked the battlefield. Illumi watched the chaos with a single cool judgment and called the opponents sloppy as he began to move. He generated afterimages that flickered across the field in shifting cadences. Kakashi's Sharingan tracked the blur, but Genma and Rado faltered. An afterimage's needle struck Genma's calf and he staggered as his chakra faltered, dropping to one knee. Rado swung wide and encountered Illumi's extended claws, which parried the blade with a screech. Illumi's speed surged and a needle flicked toward Rado's arm. Kakashi intercepted with a lightning-enhanced strike that sliced the needle in half midair. Illumi's image faded and reappeared behind Iwashi. Kakashi shouted for movement. Iwashi rolled, but a second needle grazed his thigh and he cried out as his chakra network was disrupted. He crawled, panting that he couldn't feel his leg. Goto advanced, coin spinning. Kakashi's ninja hounds erupted from the ground, Pakin and the pack lunging with snapping jaws. Goto's speed showed again as he fired coins. Two dogs yelped and retreated under the strain. Pakin alerted that their opponent was too fast. Kakashi recalled the hounds grimly, feeling chakra draining fast. Illumi warned that they were wasting energy and unleashed a volley of needles. Kakashi's Sharingan predicted the strikes and his body blurred in a whirl of throwing knives and evasive movement. Genma, still struggling, fired needles in return but Illumi's claws brushed them aside and closed in. A needle scored Genma's shoulder and his eyes dulled as his will faltered. Rado charged and tried to break the influence, but Illumi planted a needle mid-swing that disrupted Rado's focus and left him moving with empty eyes as if controlled. Illumi's chakra pulsed and Rado turned, apparently compelled to attack the masked one. Kakashi acted an earthen barrier to block the oncoming blade, but coins shredded through the wall and forced him to dodge. Genma lurched forward, needles in hand, movements jerky but determined. Iwashi dragged himself behind a tree, clutching a throwing knife. A coin grazed his hand, shattering the blade and leaving him defenseless. Kakashi faced three opponents now. He summoned a lightning hound from his hand that arced toward Illumi, who sidestepped as before and blurred away. The hound slammed into a tree, splintering wood. Rado's slash came next. Kakashi parried with Sakumo's Tanto and kicked Rado back. Genma's needle pierced Kakashi's sleeve and grazed his arm, but Kakashi's Sharingan turned and he produced a lightning clone that flared, taking a needle meant for his throat and bursting into a shower of paralyzing sparks. Illumi paused but remained unharmed, his defenses holding. Goto's coins rained again as Kakashi pushed his speed to the limit, weaving through the storm with his Tanto slashing. Goto blocked with an iron-strong grip and countered with a crushing knee, keeping the battle at a deadly, rapid tempo. Kakashi rolled, panting, his Sharingan draining him and his vision blurring. Illumi extended his claws and aimed for Kakashi's heart. Kakashi's hands moved in a flash and he unleashed water release, Dragon Bullet, a roaring water technique that surged forward. Illumi used rhythm echo, but Goto took the brunt of the torrent and skidded back, soaked. Kakashi pressed the attack, holding Raikiri in both hands for a rare dual strike. Lightning cracked through the air as Goto's coins met it and exploded into smoke. Illumi slipped through the haze and his claws raked Kakashi's arm, leaving him wounded. Rado's blade grazed Kakashi's side and Genma's Senbon nicked his thigh. Iwashi, crawling, threw a broken kunai, but Goto swatted it aside and a rifled coin struck Iwashi in the chest. Iwashi gasped and fell, stunned and badly hurt but alive. Kakashi dropped to one knee as Raikiri faded. Illumi stepped forward with a needle poised at Kakashi's throat and made a cold declaration that it was over and that Kakashi had put up a good fight. Gotoa's coins spun ready. Genma and Rado flanked Kakashi, their puppets relentless. The T-field fell silent except for Kakashi's ragged breaths as he stood outnumbered and near collapse. Chapter 17, The Reaper's Shadow. The T-field outskirts were a churned graveyard of torn earth and trampled grass. Kakashi knelt, chest heaving, his Sharingan dimming as chakra bled from him. Genma and Rado flanked him, needle-controlled puppets under Illumi's sway, their blank stares fixed on their former captain. Iwashi lay near a shattered tree, breathing shallow and barely conscious. Gotoa's hands gleamed with coins, spinning between his fingers, and he declared that it ended now. Illumi's needle hovered an inch from Kakashi's throat, and he said in a monotone that there would be no more clever tricks. Kakashi's tanto trembled in his grip as exhaustion tightened around him like a vice. Then a sudden shift swept the battlefield. A wave of hostile energy crashed over the field, raw and overpowering, breaking Illumi's control. The puppets staggered and their eyes cleared. Gunma expelled his Sinbon and muttered in confusion, and Rado dropped his blade, clutching the spot where the needle had been. Gotoa's coins froze mid-spin, his head snapping up. Illumi's dark eyes narrowed. Perched on a gnarled branch overlooking the carnage sat a tall figure, dark-skinned and composed, short white hair catching the dusk and gold-plated earrings glinting. His golden eyes held both amusement and menace, and a silk scarf fluttered over a black, ornate robe that hinted at something otherworldly. He lounged with one leg dangling, smiling as if watching an intriguing play unfold. Kakashi rasped a question, his voice hoarse, asking who the stranger was. Illumi stepped back from Kakashi and asked the same, needles still poised. The stranger introduced himself as Chika Shihōin and identified himself as a former Soul Reaper and ex-captain of Division 2, his tone smooth and almost playful but weighted with presence. Hearing the term Soul Reaper widened Kakashi's Sharingan and startled Iwashi despite his pain. Gunma dropped his Sinbon in disbelief and Rado blinked, recovering enough to echo the incredulity. Goto remained stoic and measured, his eyes assessing. Illumi tapped his temple and repeated the word, registering it with detached curiosity. Chika waved off any grim expectations and explained that he wasn't a hooded skeleton with a scythe but a retired Soul Reaper who had grown bored with paperwork. He said he dabbled in the world of ninjas when it suited him. Without warning, he used a swift shadow clone-like technique and the clone moved with blinding speed to scoop Iwashi into its arms. The clone, speaking with Chika's voice, told Iwashi to relax and that he was no use bleeding out. Then it vanished, taking Iwashi somewhere safe beyond the T-fields. Kakashi forced himself to push to his feet and asked if Chika was an ally. Chika answered that he was an ally of Konoha and darkened his tone to say that to Konoha's enemies he could be their worst nightmare. The same surge of fierce intent that had interrupted the fight pulsed again, unsettling Genma and prompting Rado to murmur relief. Goto remarked flatly that Chika's interruption was bold and implied it interfered with their mission. Illumi lowered his hand, needles spinning once more, and stated that whether nightmare or not, Chika was in his way. Chika laughed and said he liked Illumi's stoic, sharp manner. He asked what the other's purpose was: bounty, revenge, or merely bad luck, and when Illumi asked if Chika was there to fight or waste time, Chika's grin turned predatory and he reached for his Zanpakuto, which hummed faintly with a spark of lightning along its sheath. Gotoa's coins began to spin faster, a low hum building. He warned Illumi that this opponent was no ordinary foe. Illumi extended his claws slightly, his attention caught, and said he wanted to see if Chika lived up to his boast. Chika drew his blade partway, Kaminari Yoroi humming, and warned them not to blink because things were about to get loud. Illumi's killing intent surged, a cold counterpoint to Chika's fierce energy, and the two prepared to clash amid the ruined T-field. Chapter 18, Clash of Predators. The T-field trembled under twin auras as Illumi's cold killing intent met Chika's blazing bloodlust. Kaminari Yoroi's hilt thunder armor's blade sparked in Chika's grip, half-drawn, while Illumi's needles gleamed between his fingers, claws subtly extended. Goto stood poised behind his master, coins humming in his hands, a silent storm ready to break. Kakashi, Genma, and Rado watched, battered and breathless as dusk deepened around them. Chika told Kakashi, Genma, and Rado to go home, saying they would only get in his way. His tone was casual but edged with menace. Kakashi's Sharingan assessed Chika, then he nodded and ordered them to fall back in a strained voice. Genma spat a needle into the dirt and muttered that he would not argue. Rado sheathed his blade, wincing from a wound. With a flicker of his flash step, the three vanished into the forest, leaving the tea field to the predators. Illumi tilted his head and said in a monotone that fewer distractions were good. He flicked a needle as a test, aiming for Chika's throat. Chika moved in a blur with a flash step. The needle buried itself in a nearby tree. Chika cracked his knuckles and laughed, calling Illumi Needle Boy, with a provocation that cut through the air. Illumi moved with his rhythm echo technique, afterimages rippling across the field as he shifted cadence in a ghostly dance. Chika's eyes narrowed and his spiritual pressure pulsed, a black mist seeping from him that made the air oppressive. Illumi's volley of needles came next, 5 shots arcing in from multiple angles, chakra glinting on their tips. Chika used flash step again, darting right, left, forward, and thought Illumi fast but predictable. He struck with Iron Fang Strike, a palm move that cracked the air with a shockwave. Illumi twisted mid-step. The force sent him skidding back. Goto responded with Coin Gatling, coins screaming through the dusky air toward Chika's flank. Chika countered with Sky Sundering Kick, a roundhouse that tore the air and sliced coins mid-flight, scattering them in a hail of sparks. He landed with a smirk and taunted the coin-wielding butler. Illumi said that Chika was loud. His claws extended fully and he lunged with a surge of speed. Chika met him head-on with Blackout Palm aimed precisely at Illumi's neck. Illumi parried with a needle that rang against the strike, chakra sparking where metal met force. The assassin's claws swiped. Chika ducked and grazed Illumi's jaw with a fist. Goto slammed the ground and used an earth technique to send jagged spikes up from the ground, boxing Chika in. Chika leaped and landed atop a spike, balance unshaken, and called the trick cute, but Illumi was already closing the gap with rhythm echo. Needles rained toward Chika. Chika's spiritual pressure flared and the black mist thickened. Some needles faltered and fell away. He moved into Phantom Strike, fingers blurring as he struck at Illumi with a ghostly flurry. Illumi's joint control evasion allowed him to avoid the worst, but a graze to his ribs left him briefly winded. Chika muttered that the assassin was slippery and grinned. Illumi landed and shrugged off the blow, dismissing Chika's tricks as shallow. He threw a needle at a nearby bandit, which animated the fallen man enough to lurch toward Chika. The reanimated bandit lunged with jerky movements. Chika's kick sent it flying until it collapsed. Illumi's claws already slashed from behind. Chika spun into Iron Fang Strike, the shockwave clashing with claws and forcing Illumi back. Goto's coins followed, rifled shots aimed through the mist. Chika's flash steps wove through the assault, one grazing his scarf and tearing the fabric but leaving him otherwise intact. He laughed at the gang-up attempt and his eyes flashed with fierce energy. Illumi's killing intent made the air feel icy and oppressive. He said that Chika was no nightmare, and flicked a chakra-heavy needle aimed to disrupt Chika's network. Chika's spiritual pressure roared back, the black mist swelling until the needle faltered. Chika charged with Sky Sundering Kick, the air cleaved in a crescent wave racing toward Illumi. Rhythm Echo let Illumi dodge, afterimages fading. Goto took part of the impact, coins deflecting some of the force as he was pushed back with a grunt. Illumi countered with a claw slash to Chika's arm. Chika caught the wrist, used crushing strength to twist Illumi off balance, and snarled that he had him, but Illumi's joint trick freed him and a needle tagged Chika's shoulder. Pain flared and chakra flickered, but Chika's endurance suppressed the effect and his spiritual pressure surged harder. He ripped the needle free. Goto used an earth-based mud trap to soften the ground and slow Chika, but Chika used flash step to close and landed a blackout palm to Goto's chest. The butler blocked with iron strength and staggered but remained standing. Illumi commented on Chika's resilience and spun needles into a relentless volley. Chika's footwork and counterpunches snapped through the air. Illumi's claws met them. Sparks flew where magic and technique collided, neither side giving ground. Goto unleashed coin gatling at full force, dozens of rifled, glowing coins forming a relentless storm. Chika cleaved through half with sky-sundering kick, but a rifled shot grazed his thigh and left him bleeding from a wound. Illumi used his ability to animate another bandit to charge with jerky speed. Chika struck it apart until it crumpled, but Illumi's claws then cut across Chika's back, tearing his robe and leaving him wounded. Chika grunted and spun with Iron Fang strike. Illumi used Rhythm Echo to evade, but the shockwave uprooted a tree and forced Goto to dive for cover. Chika said he was starting to bore them as his bloodlust spiked and the black mist choked the air. Illumi's intent pushed back, cold and unyielding, and needles aimed for Chika's eyes. Chika's flash steps blurred again. The needles missed their mark and his phantom strike grazed Illumi, bringing the assassin to his first real stumble. Goto's coins continued to rain, and one nicked Chika's cheek. He laughed, wild and unhinged, asking if that was all they had. Illumi stated that Chika was relentless. His claws extended in a sudden lunge, but Chika caught them and twisted. Illumi popped free with a joint trick and a needle hit Chika's rib area, searing the chakra and causing him pain, but Chika forced his spiritual pressure down over it and slammed a fist into Illumi's chest, pushing him back bruised but standing. Goto spun his coins into a final barrage while Illumi joined with a volley of needles, a lethal-sounding symphony. Chika wove with flash step, dodging and wounded, but his grin only widened into something more dangerous. He gripped thunder armor fully, lightning snapping along the blade and the air humming around it. Chika called on the sword to shroud him in thunder. The sword dissolved into lightning and surged, encasing him in crackling armor. Speed doubled, power tripled, electric shocks rippled with every move. His golden eyes glowed through the mist as his spiritual pressure peaked, a black and electric storm taking form. Goto's coins froze mid-air and Illumi's needles trembled. Both assassins paused to reassess. Chika declared that now they would truly dance as thunder rolled overhead and the T-field quaked beneath the unleashed storm. Chapter 19, Thunder's Mercy. The T-field quaked as Chika's released form manifested and thunder armor's lightning coating crackled, arcs snapping across his skin and illuminating his golden eyes. Black mist swirled and his spiritual pressure surged, a storm made flesh, thunder rumbled and the air thickened with ozone and menace. Illumi stood firm, needles poised, his monotone demeanor unbroken despite the bruise on his chest. Goto's coins spun slower as he narrowed his flat gaze, both assassins reassessing the predator before them. Chika grinned broadly and announced that he had warned them it would get loud. He flexed his armored fingers. Small shocks popped and he blurred forward, speed amplified by crackling lightning. Illumi countered with rhythm echo, afterimages fanning out as needles flew in a chakra-charged volley. Chika's lightning shield flared, absorbing the needles and then erupting in a thunderous blast. Illumi dodged and slashed with his claws, but the electric wave singed his robe and forced him back. Goto struck, his rifled coins screaming and glowing with chakra. Chika answered with thunderfang, sending a roaring shockwave. The coins shattered midair, sparks raining as the blast ripped through the area and clipped Goto's shoulder, tearing fabric and wounding him. He grunted but stayed unyielding. Illumi noted the speed and lunged, claws extended toward Chika's throat. Chika shifted into thunder flow, letting lightning carry him in a blur of afterimages that landed a series of paralyzing blows. Illumi twisted his reflexes to evade two strikes, but a kick grazed his ribs and staggered him. Chika laughed wildly and taunted that thunder never missed. Goto slammed the ground and unleashed a mud wall that rose thick and protective, shielding Illumi. Chika fired a piercing lightning beam that drilled through the wall and sent dirt exploding into the air. Illumi emerged and animated two enemy bodies with needles. The reanimated figures lurched forward with jerky ferocity. Chika moved with flash step, delivering a sky-sundering kick that dispatched one animated body and toppled the other. Goto's coins followed in a relentless storm. Chika's armor sparked as it deflected most of them, but a coin grazed his thigh and left him wounded. He muttered that the attackers were pesky, his grin unchanged. Illumi slashed from behind, but Chika's lightning shield flared again and blasted Illumi away. The assassin landed and drove needles into 3 more animated bodies, taking control of them. They rose silent and obedient, swarming toward Chika. One swung a broken blade and another lunged with a raw, relentless assault. Chika's Thunderfang roared back, a shockwave tearing the attackers apart and sending them scattering, but Illumi's needle found Chika's arm and chakra flared as the assassin tried to regain the advantage. Chika ripped the needle free with a laugh, shrugging off the sting and declaring that it would take more than needles to stop him. Goto escalated, his coin gatling intensifying as the metal storm brightened. Chika countered with lightning dispersion, his armor fragments scattering across the field and creating an electric zone that froze many coins in midair and rendered them useless. A fragment of his armor formed into a lightning blade that slashed at Goto. The butler blocked, but a shock jolted his arm and numbed it. Illumi's intent surged, cold and suffocating, needles rained and claws slashed in a coordinated assault. Chika flowed through thunder flow again, afterimages clashing as blade met claw and shock met chakra. A needle grazed Chika's cheek, but he answered with an iron-charged palm that launched Illumi into the trees. The assassin crashed through a trunk and tumbled free, the impact scattering wood and knocking him off balance. Goto charged and set a spiked trap into the earth. Chika leaped with flash step, landing atop one spike and grinning, calling the attempt clever but not enough. He fired another lightning beam that pierced Goto's leg and forced him to drop to a knee, coins clattering across the ground as he was driven back and wounded. Illumi pushed himself up, bruised and torn, and observed that Chika was interesting. He lunged with claws, but Chika parried, shocks snapping against the strike. Illumi twisted and slipped free, aiming a needle toward Chika's spine, but Chika's spiritual pressure surged, black mist swirling to obscure the intent. He dodged with a flash step and cracked Illumi's jaw with a solid fist. The fight intensified and Chika's excitement swelled, lightning and mist whirling around him, but a flicker of restraint crossed his face. He acknowledged Illumi's toughness and shifted into a rapid technique that formed a bow of pure lightning. 3 lightning arrows flashed and were released in an instant. Illumi's rhythm echo avoided 2, the third struck his leg, producing a violent explosion of force that left the limb badly damaged and useless. He crumpled, claws digging into the earth, immovable but still defiant. Goto roared and sent a final coin barrage, rifling desperately. Chika's lightning dispersion pulsed, creating an electric zone that trapped the coins mid-flight. He followed with a sky-sundering kick that struck Goto's arm and rendered it disabled at the elbow. The butler staggered and collapsed, silence falling over the coins. Illumi pushed himself up despite his ruined leg and spinning needles. Chika closed with flash step and applied a controlled blackout palm to Illumi's temple, a tactical strike that shut down his nervous response and left him slumped and incapacitated. He lay with one arm limp from severe damage and his leg beyond use. Chika stood over the 2 defeated assassins. Illumi's leg was crippled below the knee and one arm was badly damaged. Goto's arm was disabled at the elbow and his leg was wounded. Chika's armor crackled and his lightning dimmed as he sheathed his gear, spiritual pressure receding from the black mist and easing. His golden eyes glinted with a strange, almost merciful calm. He told them that he could have ended them both but that he preferred a different outcome, then urged them to live and spread the warning to their comrades that Konoha kept a vigilant reaper. Illumi met Chika's gaze with his usual unreadable expression, but beneath the pain there was a faint flicker that might have been respect. Goto breathed with effort. Chika turned and flashed away into the forest, thunder rumbling once more as a parting echo. The T-field fell silent. 2 assassins lay broken but breathing, a testament to thunder's restrained fury. Chapter 20, Echoes of Thunder and Flames of Youth. With Illumi and Goto, a rare reflection. In the ruined T-field, Illumi sat among the wreckage with one leg crippled below the knee and an arm motionless from severe damage. The ground still bore marks of the fight. Despite his usual chill, a rare, genuine smile softened his face as he looked up at the sky and thought of Chika Shihōin's thunder, a predator unlike any other. He reflected that a chaotic adversary like that would intrigue certain dangerous company and mused that the prospect of such a dangerous dance was appealing. Goto stirred beside him and steadied Illumi's shoulder, bracing himself on his one good leg. Pain had left faint lines around the butler's eyes, but his face remained a stoic mask of duty. With effort, he helped Illumi to his feet. Chakra flared and their forms blurred as they slipped away into shadow and vanished from the field, leaving silence and the jagged edge of mercy behind. Hours later, under a high moon that cast silver ribbons across the forest path, Genma, Kakashi, and Rado trudged home, weary silhouettes against the night. The air still hummed faintly with echoes of the earlier battle. Suddenly, a rustle in the shadows announced the arrival of a towering figure in red, flanked by masked covert operatives whose cloaks whispered with each step. Jiraiya, the famed toad sage, stepped forward, hair catching the moonlight like a crown. His roguish smile faded when he realized one of the group was missing. Concern etched across his features as he asked after the absent youth. The three men paused, bowed respectfully, and Kakashi explained that Iwashi was safe and had been taken back to Konoha by a man named Chika Shihōin. Jiraiya's eyes brightened with intrigue at the name, and he reached to slide his chin as the name rolled through his mind like a riddle waiting to be unraveled. Rado straightened, his blade hand trembling faintly. Rado explained that he had escaped by the grace of Chika, addressing Lord Jiraiya. He added that Chika had stood against Illumi Zoldyck and his butler Goto and that they suspected those two still held them at bay. Genma twirled a fresh senbon and said that the man's bloodlust had been like a storm, fiercer than anything they had felt, that Chika claimed to be a soul reaper, a spiritual guardian of reincarnation, and that he insisted he was an ally of Konoha. Jiraiya's gaze sharpened as the sage's mind worked beneath his jovial mask. A soul reaper with overwhelming bloodlust fit the pattern of Hiruzen's shadowed operative, the one who had pierced the Sound Village's veil. Jiraiya allowed a faint smirk and called for the ANBU to escort the wounded back to the village so their injuries could be tended, then declared that he had a quarry to hunt. The ANBU nodded, cloaks fanning out like shifting shadows, and Jiraiya vanished in a flicker of chakra, leaving only the rustle of leaves and the promise of answers. Hours later, Jiraiya arrived at the tea field. The moon bathed the cleared rows in ghostly light. The ground showed the aftermath of a fierce clash, scattered bodies and trampled earth, shattered weapons and torn clothing strewed about, and a lingering pulse of dissipating Ryatsu that hinted at the battle's intensity. Jiraiya crouched and traced a scorched patch where lightning had struck. He reflected that Sensei's shadow seemed to be walking among them and that a soul reaper made the tale more tantalizing. With the resolve of a sage, he rose and slipped into the night, determined to uncover the enigma of Chika Shihōin. Far from the tea field, Chika walked through a dense forest, his haori soiled by the fight and his golden earrings catching what little moonlight filtered through the canopy. His short white hair contrasted with his dark skin, and his golden eyes held an amused gleam even as a tense aura of intense intent hung about him. He moved with a relaxed, deliberate grace. Team Guy froze mid-patrol when the forest's stillness shifted. Rock Lee went rigid, fists trembling, his green uniform taut as if gripped by an invisible force. Niji's Byakugan flared as he narrowed his pale eyes and slid into a defensive crouch, chakra coiling. Ten tightened her grip on her kunai, instincts urging caution. When the pressure eased, Chika had already appeared before them, his arrival without a trace the product of Shuunpa. He adopted a carefree grin and dusted his shoulders with theatrical flair, apologizing with a teasing tone for the earlier disturbance and saying he had been carried away on a mission. Guy tilted his head and regarded Chika with a warrior's appraisal, then broke into a radiant grin. He praised the display as a splendid testament to a challenging mission and encouraged Chika's fighting spirit. Chika returned the banter with a smirk and challenged Guy to a friendly spar to test skills. Lee, awestruck, reacted with reverence at the prospect, while Niji warned that the power they had felt moments before seemed unnatural. Guy laughed and accepted the challenge, declaring it would dishonor him to refuse the call to test strength and spirit. Chika's grin sharpened with mischief as he promised a spirited contest. He cracked his knuckles and rolled his shoulders, the movement a quiet promise of power. Team Guy tensed as the forest held its breath. The clearing fell silent as birds fled, sensing the imminent clash. A light breeze rustled leaves but could not dispel the anticipation crackling through the air. Chika stretched lazily, neck popping, golden eyes gleaming with excitement. His stance was relaxed yet predatory, a hand-to-hand assassin's poise blended with martial mastery. Across from him, Mato Guy clenched his fists and radiated unyielding determination, feet planted firmly and every muscle coiled like a spring. Tenten, Lee, and Niji stood safely aside, watching intently. Chika beckoned with a single hand, and Guy readied himself, eager to set their youthful spirits ablaze. In an instant, Chika vanished. Lee barely blinked before a thunderous impact sounded as Guy's forearm intercepted a lightning-fast palm strike that would have broken his ribs. The force sent Guy skidding back, but he dug his feet in and held his ground. Guy observed that Chika was fast and strong. Chika teased in response and vanished again. Guy's instincts drove him to twist just in time to catch a devastating axe kick from above that cratered the ground beneath him. Guy sprang away as Chika followed up with a rapid barrage of palm strikes, hands moving in a blur. Guy wove through them, dodging by narrow margins before answering with a powerful leaf hurricane spinning kick aimed for Chika's ribs. Chika ducked and used Shunpa to reappear behind Guy, delivering a palm strike toward the spine. Guy then reappeared by executing dynamic entry, appearing above with his leg extended. Chika tilted his head, smirked, and caught the kick with a single hand. The shockwave shattered the trees behind him. Chika taunted that the move hardly qualified as dynamic, then hurled Guy like a rag doll across the battlefield. Guy flipped through the air, kicked off a tree, and launched himself back, fists flying in a relentless assault. Chika met him blow for blow, palm strikes colliding with Guy's iron-like punches. Each impact sent shockwaves rippling through the area, strikes blurred together as feet, elbows, and knees clashed in a high-speed martial exchange. Guy leaped back and crouched into a stance. He acknowledged that he had hoped to save a technique for later, but Chika was pushing him. Chika sensed the change as Guy's aura swelled. His spiritual energy surged and his skin took on a reddish tint as a fiery force blossomed around him. Guy opened the third gate, the gate of life, and then vanished. For the first time, Chika's smirk faltered. A sudden fist drove into Chika's stomach and sent him rocketing backward, smashing through 3 trees before he flipped midair and landed smoothly. He wiped a trickle of blood from his lips and chuckled at the force of the exchange. Chika stomped the ground and his spiritual energy flared outward like a red mist, the pressure so intense that even Niji showed strain. Chika vanished again. Guy barely blocked a knee strike to his ribs and nearly had his shoulder jarred by a heavy chop. Chika spun into a roundhouse, but Guy caught his leg, flipped him over, and slammed him down. Chika used the momentum to launch himself back, flashing behind Guy with a swift step and driving an elbow toward his back too late. Guy unleashed Morning Peacock, a rapid assault that formed a burning wall of fists, and the barrage forced Chika down into the earth. When dust settled, Guy panted but remained steady. Then Chika laughed and rose from the crater, his jacket shredded and his body bruised, his grin broader than before. He complimented Guy's skill, eyes bright with excitement, and declared the fight far from over. Guy nodded and expressed that he would have it no other way. Both men took their stances again, one a spiritual warrior honed by long battles, the other a human who pushed past his limits through sheer will. The fight continued. Chapter 22. Chika rolled his shoulders as his spiritual energy built around him like a storm, making the air feel heavy with power. The bruises from Guy's Morning Peacock faded as his body recovered quickly. Guy, despite the damage he'd taken, stood with controlled breath and sharp focus. Guy noted that Chika was still standing after the last exchange. Chika laughed and beckoned him to show more, calling him the Green Beast. Guy grinned and accepted the challenge. He crouched, muscles coiling, and opened the 6th gate, the Gate of Joy. A shockwave radiated outward, cracking the earth beneath his feet as steam rose from his body and raw spiritual power pulsed outward, uprooting trees from the sheer force. Chika's smirk shifted to an intrigued expression. Guy disappeared and in an instant, a kick struck Chika's ribs and sent him careening through the forest, trees shattering in his wake. Guy was already on top of him in midair and launched Leaf Wolf Fong, a spinning barrage of rapid kicks that hammered into Chika and flung him back. Chika flipped in the air, braced against the flow of the battle, and released a surge of his own energy to flash step back into Guy's space. He drove a fist into Guy's stomach, catching him off guard, and followed with a palm strike that unleashed a compressed burst of spiritual punches. Guy rocketed back, carving a trench across the field. Chika was already there when Guy hit the ground. His knee struck Guy and lifted him up again. Guy twisted in midair and countered with Leaf Rising Wind, an upward strike that aimed for Chika's chin. Chika barely dodged, but Guy followed with a descending heel that slammed Chika into the ground and formed a shallow crater beneath them. Silence fell as dust settled. Niji wondered aloud whether Guy had won. Tenten, sweating, admitted she did not know what to call the outcome yet. A red aura rose from the crater and Chika pushed himself up, rolling his shoulders as small wounds closed and his breath steadied. He remarked dryly that the hit almost hurt. Guy grinned at the close call. Chika, smiling wider, declared that he would stop holding back. His spiritual energy surged higher, darkening the sky and making the air tremble. Guy's expression grew serious. Chika disappeared and reappeared inches away, fist ped. The two launched into a full-on exchange, each attack faster and more intense than the last. Chapter 23. When the dust finally settled, the forest had become a landscape of craters and snapped trunks, the ground scarred by the intensity of their clash. The two warriors stood apart, battered and breathing hard, but grinning with the exhilaration of combat. Chika wiped a trickle of blood from his lips and praised Guy's skill, calling the fight impressive. Guy, panting and giving a thumbs up, admitted that Chika's speed and strength exceeded his expectations and promised that he was not finished yet. Chika's grin widened at that. The atmosphere shifted as Guy widened his stance and channeled a massive surge of spiritual energy. The force radiating from him felt like a tempest. Tenten, Niji, and Lee struggled to remain steady under it. Guy opened the seventh gate, the Gate of Wonder, and a teal explosion of energy burst outward. His body glowed intensely as sweat steamed away and overwhelming power reshaped the battlefield. Niji covered his eyes and noted that this power exceeded anything he had seen. Tenten agreed, breathing heavily as she observed Guy reach an entirely new level. Chika exhaled slowly, his smirk unchanged, and declared inwardly that they had finally reached something worth testing. He slid a hand to his hip and gripped the handle of his sword. As he slowly drew the blade, the air hummed with electricity. Guy's sharp gaze narrowed, ready for the next exchange. Chika rested the blade against his shoulder as spiritual energy crackled around him like a gathering storm. He told Guy not to take it the wrong way and that he would give his all. He spun the sword once in his palm and invoked his technique, calling for armor Kaminari Yoroi. A thunderclap shook the battlefield as lightning erupted from Chika's body, forming a suit of electrical energy. His movements sharpened, and the air around him hummed with static. Tenten watched, stunned at the sight of the lightning armor. Chika flexed his fingers, arcs of blue electricity dancing along his limbs, and bounced on the ball of his feet, feeling the surge of power. He looked up at Guy and asked if he was ready. Guy slammed his foot into the ground, cracking the earth, his teal aura flaring as steam rose from his body. He signaled that it was time to finish this. They disappeared from sight and the forest erupted into motion. They met in midair, fists colliding as lightning and chakra sparked around them. Guy launched a devastating roundhouse. Chika ducked and countered with a lightning-infused palm strike. Guy recovered instantly and flowed into a faster, more violent leaf hurricane. Chika blocked the first kick, wove past the second, and found Guy already behind him. Guy unleashed a powerful technique that manifested as a blazing white tiger from his fist, charging forward like a cannon blast. Chika's lightning armor flared as he crossed his arms and took the onslaught. The impact shattered the landscape and sent a shockwave tearing through the trees. Niji and the others shielded their eyes and fought to stay upright as dust and smoke swirled. As the fog cleared, A blue light flickered within the dust cloud and Chika emerged, rolling his shoulders and grinning. He declared the clash exhilarating and vanished, reappearing above Guy. Gathering lightning at the tip of his weapon, he swung and unleashed a thunderous strike, a colossal bolt of energy that unleashed a blinding storm of electricity toward Guy. The earth trembled, trees caught fire, and the ground fractured beneath them. When the dust settled, Guy stood breathing heavily, aura flickering, trembling from exertion but still smiling. Chika landed across from him as his lightning armor faded. They regarded each other for a long moment before both bursting into laughter at the same time. Guy gave a thumbs up and praised Chika as a true warrior of youth. Chika returned the compliment, calling Guy a beast. They clasped hands, bruised and battered but victorious in spirit. The battle was over, and a new mutual respect had begun. Chapter 24. A Reaper's Report, a Sage's Revelation. The Hokage's office was quiet, the scratching of Hiruzen's pen the only sound. The air smelled of old paper and pipe smoke. He paused with his hand over his tea when a calm, measured voice reported indirectly from in front of the desk. Hiruzen froze and the ANBU guards in the shadows tensed. None had detected a sound or emotion. Naruto stood not 3 feet away, hands in his pockets, having returned to his usual village attire as if he had just rejoined civilian life. Hiruzen asked if the mission had been successful and whether Kakashi and the others were safe. Naruto confirmed that they were. His clone was escorting Iwashi back to the village gates and the ANBU should already have contacted the rest of the team. Hiruzen set his pen down and asked about the Zoldycks. Naruto reported that Illumi Zoldyck had been severely wounded and was incapacitated, with serious damage to his left leg and right arm that would put him out of commission for some time. He added that the butler Godo had suffered grievous injuries as well, losing his right arm and sustaining serious damage to his left leg. Hiruzen's brow tightened at the decisive nature of those outcomes, and he asked about their bodies. Naruto said he had spared them. He explained that killing had felt too final, leaving them broken and alive would serve as a lasting message and a reminder of the Reaper who watched over Konoha. A heavy silence followed. Hiruzen, taken aback by the restraint, reflected aloud that the boy's choice might be a prudent one had they killed an heir to the Zoldyck family. The village could be courting a dangerous and relentless vengeance. Naruto shrugged casually and then melted back into the shadows as silently as he had arrived, leaving Hiruzen alone with a mixture of pride and unease at how the boy was evolving. The next day Jiraiya strode into the office without formalities and told Hiruzen that he wanted information about his operative. Hiruzen feigned ignorance until Jiraiya clarified that he meant the one who had saved Kakashi's team, the one called Chika. A small flicker of surprise crossed Hiruzen's face before he composed himself and admitted that Chika was an alias, a valuable asset whose methods were unusual. Jiraiya, dead serious, said he was more than impressed and added that Chika had told them he was a soul reaper, watching Hiruzen's expression for any reaction. Naruto had described himself as a spiritual being, a keeper of the reincarnation cycle, saying his job was to guide souls and maintain the balance of life and death and that he had retired and grown bored of the paperwork. The pipe nearly slipped from Hiruzen's fingers. For a moment, he thought it was the most brilliant, most audacious cover story he had ever heard. It was so outlandish that it looped back to being the perfect disguise. Only Naruto could invent such a preposterous identity and deliver it with enough conviction to make seasoned senior ninja question reality. Then the thought soured. A keeper of the reincarnation cycle. Where would a boy, an orphan who had spent his life within Konoha, even conceive of such a thing? The words echoed in Hiruzen's mind, connecting with chilling precision to a dozen other unsettling truths. The boy's unnatural power, the casual way he spoke of killing as if it were a practiced craft, the name he had chosen Chika Shihōin. The dangerous edge beneath Naruto's grin made Hiruzen's blood run cold. The playful, absurd lie suddenly felt like a literal possibility. He had always known a dangerous entity was sealed inside Naruto Uzumaki that explained the boy's lonely childhood, the village's fear, and the heavy burden he carried. But what if the Nine Tails was only the second most dangerous presence within that body? Jiraiya asked Hiruzen if he was all right. Hiruzen took a slow, shuddering breath, smoke curling around his head like a shroud. He looked at Jiraiya, but his eyes were fixed on something distant and far more terrifying. He realized he was not merely raising a host of a tailed beast. He feared he might be raising a ghost. Chapter 25. Masks and Revelations. The heavy doors to the village leader's office swung open, admitting the weary forms of Kakashi, Genma, and Rado, accompanied by operatives from the Special Operations Unit Hiruzen had dispatched. Their clothes were torn and stained with dirt and dried blood, their faces etched with an exhaustion that ran deeper than physical fatigue. They bowed in unison, the gesture carrying the weight of their recent ordeal. Hiruzen gestured for them to rise and asked for a report. Kakashi stepped forward, his visible eye dark and serious. He reported that the initial phase of the mission had proceeded as expected and that they had encountered multiple bandit groups en route to the Land of Tea, which they had dispatched without issue. Genma added that the client and her butler had seemed overly formal and oddly quiet, behavior they had attributed to nobility until the feeling that something was off took hold. Rado agreed, noting there had been no wasted movement and no fear during the bandit attacks. He now recognized their composure as unnatural. Kakashi explained that his suspicions were confirmed when they were ambushed. He described the attack as precise and calculated, not the chaotic assault of ordinary bandits. The butler struck first with a high-speed projectile, and Kakashi avoided it with a last-second substitution technique. Then the client transformed in a way that was not simply a conventional transformation technique. She physically reshaped herself and revealed the assassin known as Illumi Zoldyck. Hiruzen listened without betraying that he already suspected the truth. Kakashi admitted that the assassins had been on another level. Their speed and techniques were unlike typical ninja methods. They had outmaneuvered Iwashi, then used a form of control technique on Genma and Rado, turning them against Kakashi. The team had been overwhelmed and came within moments of being eliminated. Hiruzen prompted them for what happened next. Genma described the arrival of a new presence whose pressure shattered the Zoldyck control. He reported that the newcomer had introduced himself as Chika Shihōin. Rado said the man had claimed to be a soul reaper, a kind of spiritual guardian, and that his power had felt alien. Kakashi added that Chika had taken Iwashi and ensured his safety by sending him away with a clone created without hand seals, then ordered the others to retreat, insisting they would only be in his way. Rado concluded that they owed their lives to him. He stated they did not know the outcome of Chika's battle, but that whoever he was an ally of unbelievable power. Hiruzen acknowledged their courage, dismissed them, and instructed them to report to the hospital for evaluation and rest. As they filed out, their footsteps echoing in the silent office, Hiruzen's mind became a storm of possibilities. A soul reaper, an alias, a web of half-truths that felt uncomfortably close to the truth. He needed answers. He ordered the Special Operations team to find Naruto Uzumaki immediately. The operatives melted into the shadows and were gone. For the rest of the day they searched. They checked Naruto's small, sparse apartment and found a half-eaten cup of instant ramen gone cold. They swept his usual haunts, the ramen shop, the village streets, the training grounds, and the forests on Konoha's outskirts. They questioned Tuchi and Ayam, who had not seen him since the day before. Naruto was nowhere. Each report came back as a dead end. The village leader realized with fresh frustration what he had long understood. One does not find Naruto Uzumaki, one waits for Naruto Uzumaki to allow himself to be found. The boy was hiding and actively avoiding the conversation he knew was coming. Days later, in the academy graduation hall, the air was thick with the nervous energy of newly appointed junior ninja. Irika stood at the front and announced the team placements. He named Team 10 as Ino Yamanaka, Shikamaru Nara, and Choji Akimichi, with Asuma Sarutobi as their senior ninja instructor. Shikamaru muttered that it was a drag. He named Team 8 as Hinata Hyuga, Kiba Inazuka, and Shino Aburame, with Kurinai Yuhi as their instructor. Kiba celebrated, with Akamaru responding eagerly from inside his jacket. He then announced Team 7, Sakura Haruno, Naruto Uzumaki, and Sasuke Uchiha. Sakura sprang up in triumph at being chosen, while Naruto gave a casual, confident wave that drew a few admiring glances and a sharp glare from Sakura. Hours passed, and the other teams had long since left with their new instructors. Only Team 7 remained, their patience wearing thin. Sakura paced by the door, complaining that he was late. Naruto yawned with his feet propped on the desk and told Sakura to relax, suggesting their missing teammate might simply be lost on the path of life. Suddenly the door slid open and a man with gravity-defying silver hair and a half-mask poked his head in. He told them to meet him on the roof, then vanished in a puff of smoke. On the rooftop, the sun was bright. Kakashi Hatake leaned against the railing, his single visible eye scanning his new team. Sakura's admiration for someone was obvious. Sasuke carried the weight of vengeance in his expression. Naruto stood where he always stood, loud, unfazed, and oddly confident. Kakashi's gaze stopped. He had seen the boy around the village before, the underachieving prankster who nevertheless drew attention. Now, looking more closely, recognition struck him. The shaggy, untamed hairstyle, the piercing, intelligent golden eyes, the confident set of the jaw take away the whisker marks, change the skin tone, add a pair of golden earrings and a regal scarf, and the boy was a younger mirror image of the man who had saved them in the land of tea. He looked unmistakably like Chika Shihōin. Kakashi's calm, analytical mind reeled. Coincidence? A relative? Or something stranger? The Soul Reaper's words echoed in his head and suddenly did not sound so absurd. Chapter 26, The Bell Test and a Reaper's Gaze. The sun climbed high over Training Ground 3, casting long shadows across the clearing. 3 wooden posts stood as silent witnesses to generations of trials. Kakashi Hatake held up 2 small bells, their silver surfaces catching the light, and explained the rules. They had until noon to take the bells from him. Those who succeeded would pass. Those who failed would be tied to a post and forced to watch him eat his lunch. Sakura pointed out that with only 2 bells, one of them was guaranteed to fail. Kakashi explained that the test was meant to pit them against each other, measuring not just individual skill but the will to succeed over comrades. Then he told them to begin. Sakura and Sasuke vanished into the foliage with surprisingly adept movements for rookie ninja, following the first rule of combat: concealment. Naruto, however, did not move. He stood in the middle of the clearing, arms crossed, smirking as he sized up his new teacher and said he would miss the fun if he hid, that he wanted to see the legendary copy ninja in action, and that Kakashi should live up to the hype addressing him as his senior. Kakashi's amusement faltered. The use of the term senior was a subtle sign of disrespect, but more unsettling was the look in Naruto's eyes. Not the look of a student to a teacher, but of a predator sizing up another predator. It was the same assessing gaze Chika Shihōin had once given the Zoldycks. Naruto moved in a blur. No flashy technique, no grand declaration, just raw, unnerving speed. He launched a high kick aimed at Kakashi's head. Kakashi blocked with a raised forearm, the impact rippling through the air, and found himself facing a level of speed and strength far beyond typical academy training. Using the block as a pivot, Naruto spun into a low sweep. Kakashi leaped clear, but Naruto followed immediately, driving a fist toward Kakashi's chest. Kakashi caught the punch and the two traded a silent contest of strength. Kakashi noted aloud in his head that the taijutsu was impressive, beyond rookie level. Naruto grinned and implied he had received good instruction, then produced a shadow duplicate that formed hand seals and launched a fireball technique. Kakashi reacted with a substitution technique, leaving behind a smoldering log as the fireball consumed the space where he'd been and reappearing calmly on a branch above. The log smoldered and the duplicate dispersed. Naruto stood below with his hands in his pockets, chastising Kakashi for not taking the test seriously and insisting that he not be underestimated. Hidden among the trees, Sasuke watched with widened eyes. He registered that Naruto could use the fireball technique and that his speed matched, perhaps exceeded, Sasuke's own. Kakashi returned to the clearing and acknowledged that he needed to take matters more seriously. Naruto's smirk disappeared and was replaced by a cold, appraising stare. He moved again, faster than before, an instantaneous flash step that placed him behind Kakashi with a kunai at his throat. For a heartbeat it seemed Kakashi had been caught. Kakashi's form dissolved into a swirl of leaves. It was a clone. The real Kakashi stepped out from behind a tree, expression grave. This opponent was no ordinary rookie. The speed resembled that of a high-ranking ninja, the tactical awareness felt like covert special forces training, and the casual, bored confidence brought Chika Shihōin to mind. Naruto introduced himself as Naruto Uzumaki and added that, if Kakashi preferred, he could be called Chika. The name hit Kakashi like a physical blow. The resemblance and the claim could not be casually dismissed. Before Kakashi fully processed the revelation, Sasuke struck. A hail of shuriken and kunai flew from the trees, aimed at Naruto's back. Naruto never turned. With a series of fluid, economical movements, he deflected every projectile with the back of a single kunai, sending them ricocheting harmlessly into the surrounding foliage with practiced precision. Sasuke emerged, his Uchiha eye burning crimson with focus. He declared that the games were over and called Naruto an idiot, insisting that Naruto was in his way. Naruto thought that Sasuke was always dramatic, then squared off to meet the Uchiha's challenge, accepting that if Sasuke wanted to fight, they would. Kakashi positioned himself between them. The bells at his hip were suddenly forgotten. The test had been overtaken by something else entirely. He was no longer simply a proctor. He was the bewildered observer of a battle between two monsters, one of whom wore the face of the village pariah and spoke with the voice of its most terrifying new legend. Chapter 27. A Predator's Game. The air in the clearing was thick with tension. Sasuke stood poised, his Sharingan with its single mark spinning as it focused on Naruto. Kakashi remained on the periphery, his mind reeling from the revelation. The mission was no longer to get the bells, it was to understand the enigma standing before him. Sasuke accused Naruto, low and growling, of having hidden himself the entire time and playing the fool, and demanded why. Naruto shrugged in a lazy, infuriating gesture and said that it had been amusing. He shifted his weight, and the atmosphere changed. The playful arrogance vanished, replaced by a cold, predatory stillness that Kakashi had once witnessed from Chika in the land of tea. Naruto acknowledged that the game was over. Then Naruto was simply gone. Not in an instant movement or a puff of smoke. He simply was not there anymore. Sasuke's Sharingan darted around the clearing, its single mark struggling to track any trace of movement or chakra. There was nothing. Naruto's presence had been utterly erased. The birds resumed their chirping and the wind rustled the leaves as if he had never existed. Sakura whispered from her hiding spot, wide-eyed and confused, asking where he had gone. Kakashi narrowed his visible eye and recognized the technique for what it was: complete presence concealment, a high-level stealth art used by the most elite covert units and assassins. To suppress one's chakra and presence so perfectly that even a Sharingan could not detect it was a feat of